nay worry. And if I've done my job right, which I have not, almost.
How's my audio?
Oh, you sound lovely. And
okay, great.
And boosh! And these lovely mother hubs can see you as well. Hey! Okay, firstly, thank you so much for taking the time to come hang out with us.
My pleasure.
Friends, I was a very much a terrible host. I didn't realize that Stephen was on Desert Bus when I was blepping him invites at like 2 a.m, being like, "Hey, you gotta come on my show!" while you were careening around the country.
It's not a problem, actually. Back in my work days, I used to do a lot of traveling, and also that circumnavigation I did back in 2017 taught me that kind of time is meaningless.
No big deal. Yeah, just a bit of circumnavigation. And yes, Lizzie, you do have a Canadian guest in the house.
Hey.
But no, do you prefer Steve or Stephen?
It really doesn't matter to me. Steve is usually a little bit easier to say just because it's a little bit shorter.
So Steve, thank you so much for joining us. God, you are a very difficult person to introduce. And I mean that in a very good way.
Okay.
So, friends, for those of you who don't know, Stephen was one of, I believe, the co-founder of XE, which is a website that does smart, clever money stuff. It's a currency conversion site that lets you know how much your cash is worth in varying places. And I got to know Stephen, I think, off a video games recommendation thread on Twitter, I believe. That's how we ended up becoming, I don't want to say digital cohorts. That implies this level of conspiracy. But
a lot of people know me. If you're struggling to introduce me, a lot of people know me as Steve, Steven, Dengler, or Dracogen from Faster Than Light. So if you've ever killed off any of those characters, that's me.
And for those who don't know you, how did you get that? How did you gain that honor?
It just backed the Kickstarter at a very early time and at a very high level, as I've done a whole bunch of times, actually. So, I mean, that's probably part of the larger narrative that you're contacting me to talk about, which is sort of the history of how did I go from being sort of, a guy that started a company in his garage with his best friend to financing video games and movies and web series and things like that. And the short answer is I worked really hard for a really long time for not very much money. And then the company got very successful. And I sort of looked around and I said, it's a whole big wide world with lots of interesting people in it, doing lots of interesting things. People who maybe are like I was, 10 or 15 years ago and could use a little bit of money or mentoring or something like that. And I always got my energy from that kind of passion, from that kind of involvement and creativity and the desire to move things forward. And so just connecting with those people was like being at the beginning of the company again with that kind of energy and excitement. So
yeah.
I probably went a little bit crazy, around 2010 to 2015, let's say. I backed a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff, like stuff from, like video games to, I was the top backer, for example, in the Veronica Mars movie. So I got to be in the Veronica Mars movie, stuff like that.
Yo!
And yeah, actually, it was a lot of fun. And I was doing things like web series. I was executive producer on a really cool series called Star Trek Continues that was basically the continuation of the 3-year initial mission with the final 2 years. And we actually brought back some of the original actors from the original series, like Michael Forrest, to recap his role as Adonis, right? And it was a really and of course I got a part. So when you pay, you typically get to play too. So I did a lot of different things all over the place, had a pile of fun doing it. And then sort of I started realizing that, I've got a family, my kids are getting a little bit older. I kind of have to maybe rein in my desire to be everywhere and do everything and just focus on the things that are really important to me. So I dialed back the number of projects, probably not the magnitude of investment. And I had a couple of really cool experiences. I had a couple of pretty negative experiences. And at that point, I just said, okay, hold on. what am I doing here? I need to, while it's neat to get out there and try a million different things with a million different people, and I met some great people early on. Like I met people that ended up being like really, really big names before they were big names, just because I got kind of excited and excited to do things with them, right? Like, I mean, maybe not big names, but big names to me, like Harrison Cripps. I met him when he still had a job, and I just like, what you're doing is the coolest thing I've ever seen. How can I help you? How can I help you stop having a job and, doing that? And I mean, I'm not responsible for what he did for Louis. I mean, he was just so obviously just this amazing talent. And I just got involved however I could. And I think I played maybe a little part, right, in that transition. And got a bunch of cool props out of it too, which I paid for. I didn't steal them or anything. But things like that, just meeting people that were involved, doing some cool things before they kind of became big. And while that sounds really cool, and it certainly is kind of cool, it's also a lot of time and energy. When you're running a business, when you have a family, you're flying off here, you're flying off there. And it kind of hit me once. I was at a charity. I used to go to the Child's Play charity auction, which is, so Desert Bus, the money they raise goes to Child's Play, which puts, among other things, raises money to give games in children's hospitals, right? Video games, board games, things like that, among the other things that they do. So, I was at Child's Play charity auction. It was around Christmas time, and I was with a table of my friends and, just having a blast. And I'm just thinking, like, my family's at home, my kids are at home. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm having fun, but am I really where I'm supposed to be right now? Is this really what I'm supposed to be doing, right? When the kids are really young, they don't even, they're amazing to interact with. But if you pop off for a couple of days and pop back, they don't, right? There's not like this sense of, okay, you left me for a couple of days, what the heck? They get a little older and suddenly it's like, okay, yeah, right? Like you're both invested in this relationship and it's a pile of fun. Like, should I really be, and it led me to some bigger questions too, right? Should I really be flying all over the world for business, right? Should I be out of town a lot? And it made me sort of reevaluate some things in my life. And in fact, I ended up phasing out of, around 2016, out of the company that I had founded to focus more on my family and a few little side projects. But in that time frame, I did a lot of little projects, and I did some pretty big projects too that involve video game financing. I helped Double Fine with 6 games, Hidden Path, for example, Defense Grid 2. They had a Kickstarter that didn't quite go where they wanted it to go, and I picked up the funding, and I mean that was a lot of money, right? So, and a lot. So I've learned a little bit along the way, so I don't think I'm completely out of my league to talk to you about what you want to talk about. These days, I am involved in a very small number of things. I'm very, very jealous of my time. I pick and choose my engagements very, very, very carefully. But I've certainly done a lot of different things in the last, I guess mainly 10 years, but 10 or 15 years. And the last 5 years have been primarily about just sort of, all right, being very, very choosy about what I'm involved with. Both because of time. There's only so many hours in a day, right? I mean, if you think of the most valuable currency you have, it's your time. It's what are you putting your time into? And then the other thing is, if you're going to get significantly involved in something, it's really important to make sure that it's a safe place, right, for you to invest. And I don't just mean monetarily. I mean emotionally. I mean, is everyone on the same frequency? Are we all reading off the same script? Like, do we have the same expectations? And I got involved in a couple of big projects where, hey, some of them did very well, but where we weren't all on the same page, right? And that was where I went, okay, right, it's not all just fun and games. I can't just walk into this and have a blast. I need to be very choosy about where I put my emotional investment. So,
I mean, thank you for that sums up incredibly well all the varying reasons why I wanted to introduce you to this lovely crew and get them a chance to chat with you yourself, because you've come at video games from a very different perspective. And I'm going to be focusing on video games conversationally because that's the only industry stuff that I know. And
I've played them my whole life, so I'm happy to talk video games.
So, like, you've seen the guts of them, but from a very, very different angle. And especially now that small to medium-sized teams are becoming more and more the main staple. Like, the big battleship AAAs they're their own mess over there. It is unlikely that any of us in this conversation will ever be at the helm of one of those projects, but being involved in a small, and by small I mean like like 3 to 10 person team, or medium, like maybe up to about 40, 45 people, like that kind of size. There's
So that's where I came. That's where I came to settle, right? So, the most fun I had with the company that I again started with my best friend in a farmhouse and built it up from nothing with zero investment from anyone on the outside, and it was a blast, right? And the best years were up to about 20 people. And I'm not saying it was bad after that. It was just hard after that. Like, it was a lot harder. With fewer than 20 people, you kind of have free communication. Everybody knows what everyone's doing, what everyone's working on. Everyone feels involved. Everyone feels connected, right? Almost around 20, like by magic, there's a little light switch where you start hearing, oh, I didn't know that was happening. I didn't know we decided to do that, right? I didn't know that. And now now you have to start working to communicate. So teams beyond a certain size just naturally start running into inefficiencies due to their size, right? And humans are really, really well set up mentally and emotionally to work with small teams of people. I can't remember who it was. I think it was someone maybe at Amazon in the early days called it like the 2 pizza rule. If you can't feed your team with 2 pizzas, you got to rethink your team, right?
So wait, no team bigger than 2 people?
How much people eat though. Sorry?
No team bigger than 2 people? What the heck?
Because
every pizza's a personal pizza if you believe in yourself.
Right. Well, and when I was younger, I could pack away pizza, right? So so XE was amazing when it got bigger, just because the things that it could accomplish were that much larger. But at the same time, I did almost the 2 founders of the company, myself and my co-founder Barrick, did every job in that company at one point or another, from stuffing envelopes to answering phone calls, like accounting, programming, system administration, absolutely everything. And it was kind of like a superpower because you kind of knew every corner of the company, right? You knew when things weren't going quite right, your spider sense would go off and you go, I think it might be this, I think it might be that. And then past 20, you're really working to just have that same connection to the project. Let's not call it the company, right? Yeah. And I think that's true as well with video games. And I ran into that a couple of times. The games that I got involved with where the teams were small and cohesive and everyone had the same vision and that was communicated well and it was under good leadership and the teams were bought in and had authority and investment in the project worked out great. And the things that were bigger require a certain skill set, right? Yes. Management, active management. And the number of people who are good at active management is a small number of people. And a lot of people appear good at it and aren't, right? And it's not because they're bad people. It's not because they're incompetent or something like that. It's because management of a team of people is as much about that individual mix of people as it is anything else, right? And you can be one of the best managers in the world and come to a team of people where there's some problem with gelling. Now, I shouldn't say that. The best managers in the world, yes, can probably come into that situation and make it work. But the number of people who are really good at the things they've done before and then get into a new situation and assume we can just Control-C, Control-V into this situation, right? That's the challenge. So under 20 people, it's just a different problem. The problems
I want to just highlight on that one because it is a problem that we do suffer in the games industry frequently, and I don't want to get into current games industry news because it's just a misery turgid, and I do want to focus on like the positive experiences. But we do see a lot of problems that come from the old adage of, promoted to your incompetence. Like, people who are good at a specific skill set are then promoted to the point where they have to do that and also be a manager, but with no additional training. It's like, you over there, you're a great artist. You do art better than anybody else. Now you're going to do art and manage 10 people. Go. Right.
Right. And there's no way to walk that back when you're wrong. That's the real problem, right? So now you're art director for the project, and now you're managing people. You're lead artist, now you're art director. That's a different thing, completely. And like you say, you have 10 people working under you, and you're not good at that. Well, how do you go back to where you were? I mean, that's a failure. You failed. You're a failure in the organization. And presumably that art director came with more money. Now, do you lose that if you go backwards? So here's this company in an awkward situation where, let's not say company, here's this team where you've promoted someone past their competence through the best of intentions. How do you get them back into that situation without it being a loss or a failure? And I think if companies could address that, and the beautiful part of a 20-person company is the titles are a lot less meaningful, right? In fact, if you can kind of avoid titles, or use them as you want. Okay, you're VP of whatever, right? You're VP of art. Well, what does that mean? I don't know. I don't know what it means. So does it mean you tried to manage some people and it didn't work? Okay, and we moved you back here. Well, okay, I'm not paying you less. Let's just move you back to where you were. Okay,
Yeah.
everyone looks around the table and goes, good idea. Let's do that. When a 300-person company or 3,000-person company, you get promoted to pay scale BO6. That's a big bump up. Now what? That has a very, because bigger companies have at one point or another encountered situations where there were misunderstandings or hard feelings. So everything's documented now. So now here are your new list of responsibilities, A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Yeah.
Okay. But now you're not good at it. Well, we can't just move you back like I did in that 20-person company. Now, am I at the same pay scale? Is there a lateral move that works okay? You know what? I'm offended now. I'm going to this other company that's been, headhunting me for 6 months. It is so, I mean, in any organization, it is so critical to have a culture that is consistent and predictable, where people are actually stakeholders in the process and feel like they are part of the process. And the moment you lose that, you lose the people. And a lot of big companies think, oh, I lose a person here and there. That's not a big deal. You lose 2 or 3 core people on any project, you're done.
We've seen this very much with.
I don't care if you're 300 people, you're done.
With especially teams like BioWare have definitely shown that there's no magical runes inscribed upon the walls of a game studio that exudes forth a game. It is people. And to have those miscommunications, have those like fallings apart of structure and losing a chunk, you can end up losing a core of what has turned that company into a 300-person studio.
Well, that's the old saying, right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So, the culture of a corporate, right? It does. The culture of a team is what it can accomplish. It's its outlook, it's its attitude. 1 or 2 people, right, in that team get run through the ringer. Okay, oh no, we lost 1 or 2 people. Everyone else in that team is looking and going, oh my God, this is not what I thought was going on here. This is not right. This is not the place that I thought it was. You know what? I get 3 headhunting emails a day. I will get back to them actually. Clickety, clickety, clickety. Yeah, let's have a meeting, right? So, and then before you know it, you've lost the whole team. Okay, the beautiful part of keeping it small is that when you make a misstep, you can step back. You can look around the table and go, I think we all agree that was the wrong thing to do. I'm sorry. That was that was through the best of intentions. We made that mistake. Can we all agree? Right. Because guaranteed you have 3 or 4 hats anyway, right? But the bigger the company that you're in, the more likely you are wearing a specific hat that's very well defined because 1 or 2 people had a problem with HR and so they had to document it. And so that's the other problem with big companies is that the infrastructure, the bureaucracy of that bigger company starts to be a bigger and bigger part of the day.
Indeed.
I remember the first time that I was in a meeting about meetings. I had this really meta, self-awareness moment. And I said to myself, I'm in a meeting about how many meetings we should be having in a week. Wait a minute.
Hang on.
Come on. I got a punch out of eject. That was when I thought, oh gosh, we're that company now, right? We're not that lean, mean 20-person, 15-person team. We're a company that has meetings about meetings, and there's meetings about HR, and there's meetings. And it's not wrong. All of the things that you're doing, corporate training and delineating roles and being very clear with your communications, it's all because at one point or another you have run in, or some other company like you has run into a problem from not doing that. But then you don't have, right? You start going from being that freebooting company to...
Yeah. I feel I kind of buried the lead here because we've actually just gotten into the meat of what I was going to set it up, make it like an arc, like a saga, because video games.
You did it so subtly and effectively that we just ended up here naturally.
Yeah, well, we've had the last 2 parts of the hero's journey. Let's have the call to action. No. So the reason why I felt it was so important to get you on this year. That's why I was even if we have to, juggle your schedule around, the reason why I wanted to get you on is because video games are doing great. The world's in a shitty situation right now, and lockdown is in varying levels of bad all over. Because of the situation we found ourselves in, digital entertainment's gone through the roof, and nothing more so than video games. which means...
You know this happened before, right? You know, in the Great Depression, board games took off.
Yeah.
Like Monopoly was like, okay, the world is crap right now, but I can pretend to be a business magnate. And look, we can spend our days, you know, pretending and role-playing and having fun doing this.
Hells yeah.
Nothing new under the sun, right? This is totally...
So what this has meant is a massive influx of cash, and not like cash from speculative investment or, you know, cash from like a potential land grab for a new technology space. Just more money from users. And so this is going to lead to rapid growth. And so, you know, those 3 people that made like a quirky little indie game last year that is now has action figures in Target. Okay, I don't know if Inner Sloth was 3 people, but I'm not to pick on Among Us, but they have gone from our game kind of failed. All right, well we'll make another one and see what happens. To feck, we're in everything now.
That was Angry Birds though. They made like 20 games that didn't go anywhere, and then Angry Birds, boom, right?
And then they had like massive motion pictures, and I think we're in an environment where we're going to see more of those like mad breakaway successes. I was failing to talk to these lovely Mother Hubbards earlier about Yacht Club, the makers of Shovel Knight.
Love them.
And how they are now doing multiple projects at once. And I was starting to worry that they might be suffering the overgrowth. But supposedly, like their new title is very, very good. They've kept lean and focused, and that's why
here's hoping.
Yeah, here's hoping. But that's why the examples you were just giving were so important, because that's what happens. And it creeps up on teams, because you start off with a team of 10 or 15 people. You make a title, usually by the skin of your bloody teeth, and it does good. And you're like, cool. But wouldn't it be great if we could just hire someone to handle, I don't know, build management? All right, we've got a guy. He handles build integration stuff. That's now his thing. Like art teams, we could really use just someone as a dedicated technical artist. I'm like, yeah, no, that makes sense. And then for the next title, they're rocking 40 people, and nobody really knows what happens. But then you continue to have this momentum. You're almost like hiring via problem solving as your team expands and expands. And that's why situations that you're talking about, they sneak up on you. You know, sometimes it can often feel like a title goes from like plucky indie to juggernaut overnight, and it isn't. It grows. I don't know what this hand movement is I keep doing. It's just skittering. I don't know.
My bit rate has dropped on my end. Just give me a sec. I'm going to try to see if I can do anything about it. Am I still coming in okay on your side?
You're still coming in through lovely for us.
Okay. All right. I won't worry about it then. They tell you not to look at yourself, and I'm trying not to. But my view window's over here, but then you put me right under the camera, so I'm not happy about that. All right. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do this.
We got time. We're in no rush.
Mr. Post-it note. I'm going to put it right over my face. There we go.
There we go. I've just had to get used to looking at my own dumb face on the daily.
Doesn't want to snick. Yeah. So when I look back at the projects that I've been involved with, as an outsider, you know, the ones that were the most fun were where I was closely involved and relatively significantly invested, or not very significantly invested and completely arm's length. So there was no real middle ground. The ones where I was more financially involved, but not sort of involved in the day-to-day. And I don't mean making decisions or anything, just having insight into the way that the program was, the project was progressing.
Yeah.
Those ended up not being very fun. And I also think that, and really at the end of the day, I wasn't doing this to make money. I was doing this because I was really enjoying the engagement and having fun and working with people that, you know, in some cases were almost kind of like childhood heroes. Like, you know, I played their games when I was a kid, and now I get to actually make games with them, you know.
Well, I tell you what, let's get into some specifics. I'm
going to be careful. I don't want to say any negative things about any of the people that I've worked with, because almost everyone I worked with, I had good experiences and bad experiences. But go ahead. I'll answer to the best of my ability.
I don't know. If you could go into one of the projects that you really enjoyed. Like, let's celebrate the good parts. And just as an FYI, if there's anything that I ask about you can't talk about or can't go into, please don't hesitate to say, sorry, I can't get into that. Myself and these lovely Mother Hubbards will not be offended. We know the drill.
So, I mean, fortunately, there's not a lot that these days that I can't talk about. I have one project I'm not going to talk about. I mean, I can talk a little bit about it to tell you why I don't want to talk about it, and maybe later. But
okay, maybe later.
So,
and sorry to interrupt. Just as a quick one, the Maflamf in chat. That is a long-running gag of ours for when we've had individuals who have worked on either like big IPs where they can't divulge information or projects under ramp. Maflamf became like our made-up acronym for a completely fictitious video game. So I figured I should explain that, lest the chat starts seeming like it's having some kind of meltdown.
It sounds to me like, something when, someone asks you a question like, what video game are you working on? You go, I don't remember. You know what I mean? Like muttering under your breath some nonsense word. Does it stand for something? Is it an acronym?
We originally used it as a fake acronym to point out how they're so useless for conveying information in video games now because there's so many games, and it just became a nonsense word. We had a very good friend who did community consultancy for AAA IPs, and they absolutely could not talk about any of those IPs, but we needed to give them a way to articulate what they did in those spaces, so that's kind of where it came from,
I see. That makes sense. Okay, so remind me of what the question was, because I've totally forgotten now.
No, I wanted to go into the good for a second. So, is there one project that stands out as a really good experience for yourself to work with or on?
Well, why don't I just talk about the good? I mean, almost every project had good and bad parts, right? So why don't I talk about the good parts of the projects that I've done that stand out, right? So
that would be lovely.
I
got enough coffee. I got plenty of time.
I can't remember how I think it was just over Twitter, connected with Tim Schafer at Double Fine. No, you know what? I'd been doing some fundraising for Desert Bus, like collecting artifacts and getting them signed by heads of game studios and things like that, as I recall. Yeah. And I think that's how I first sort of came into contact with Tim. And he was joking on Twitter one day about something like a port of some game, right? And I think I responded, this is over 10 years ago, so I can't remember the exact details. But as I recall, he's joking, something about one game. And someone said, well, hey, when is that game coming to consoles? And Tim joked, oh, when we get X $100,000, to which I wrote underneath, like, that's it? That's what it would cost for you to get this game to a console? And then he wrote back, like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, like, DM me, like, let's talk, right? And so the first the first sort of deal I did with Tim at Double Fine was 3 games, which were games that existed on current platforms that just needed some money to get ported over. And I believe it was Psychonauts, which they were looking for a Mac version, Costume Quest and Stacking, which existed on the consoles, but not on the PCs. So it was a while ago, so... and it was a super easy, sort of cut and dried kind of like, these properties exist, their code base exists, they just need a little love to get them over onto the consoles or onto the PCs where we know they're going to find a home. Yeah. And we did it, and it was kind of, the project scope was really small, the value proposition was super easy to understand, and it was just a lack of resources, and boom, clickety-click, and it worked really well. The second, then we did another 3 games together, and these were more creative. And the first one of those games is probably my favorite project that I did with Double Fine, because it was called Middle Manager of Justice, and it was a tablet game. I don't think it's on the store anymore, but it was a superhero game, but you didn't play as a superhero. You played as their middle manager, branch office manager of Superhero Incorporated Local 532 or something like that, right? So it was and you built up a stable of superheroes and you sent them on missions, and you sort of did have some gameplay as the superheroes, right? But you were basically playing as the middle manager and telling them what to do, upgrading the base, sending them on missions, stuff like that. And it was a lot of fun. And one of the things that was kind of fun is because they actually incorporated some of the ideas that my kids and I made a little video about superheroes, and they were really young, and it was super adorable. And we set it down, and they incorporated a bunch of those ideas into the game just for fun, right? So that was kind of a neat thing where we were just sort of messing around, and a bunch of that sort of messing around ended up in the game, which was a lot of fun.
Oh,
so that was more than
cool.
just here's an IP, and now it's ported to here's something we're working on that wouldn't exist without you. Let's build it together. So, I mean, every project I've ever done with anyone has its positives and negatives, but that was the most memorable positive from that project where, you know, we actually, and that kind of got me addicted, right? Because I thought, oh, wow, that's a lot of fun, right? I could get used to that. When Defense Grid 2, I don't have the exact numbers down. Defense Grid 2 ran a Kickstarter, and they reached, I think, maybe one milestone, but not their total milestone. And my kids and I played Defense Grid, the original one, a lot. And so we reached out to them, or I reached out to them and said, look, you know, what are we talking here? And in the end, I shouldn't say I financed because the Kickstarter money was in there too, but it was 90-something% of the game, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, we put the kids' names in there. We put some, like, little Easter eggs that I actually played one of the AI cores. I was the Taylor core. So, you know what I mean? And that, too, was a lot of fun, right? Like, memorable stuff like that. Yeah. Meanwhile, I'd been doing some acting here and there. And, you know, I did a lot of acting in college, but, you know, here was, you know, me as a grown man kind of having a second childhood. So, I mean, that was the kind of the fun parts. You know, the fun parts, the not so fun parts of any of the projects were the kinds of things that we talked about, right? Where you got into inefficiencies of scale or teams or technology. And, you know, what really I found it frustrating was while my expertise lay in another part of business, I could have applied some of it to those situations, but I was a third party. So,
yes.
You know, sometimes I had to watch helplessly from afar as a decision that didn't seem like a good decision to me. And I'm not talking about any specific company or Tim or Jeff at Hidden Path. I'm not talking about those people anymore. I'm talking about projects in general where things were maybe happening that I didn't think were a good idea, but I'm like, all right, these people know what they're doing, right? And then you're like, no, that actually didn't work. And in fact, right, I sort of saw that coming. And I thought, all right, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to be, if I either have to be putting the money in and literally just whatever happens, happens. And there's a limit for me where I can, you know, above a certain amount of money, I can't just go, oh, you know, whistle, 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 I lost it all. Right?
Yes.
But, and then there's a lot of money where you're putting a lot of time and effort into it, and you're thinking, like we go back to what I said earlier, why am I doing this versus something else that I could be doing? So let me just roll in something I was talking about earlier. I mean, big picture, I'm 100% focused on you know, where my family is right now and my personal relationship with my family. And it's really neat. I'm super fortunate to be able to do that. One of the things that my family and I have been doing for a while is building the lore around the game world. And I've started working with people, keeping the team really small, to make that into an actual game and sister animated series. And the difference is in this time, it's 100% just under my purview. There's nothing here that's happening that is weird or strange. It's all the lessons that I've learned. I can't say I have a ton of lessons in you know, animated series, but certainly I've learned a lot in video games and in business in general. And you know what? I'm just taking it slow, and there's no particular rush. I mean, how many projects can you say there's really no monetary constraint on it, right? It's just whatever I want it to be and the fun that we have. What's neat, though, is the team is at the point, and I'm not going to give numbers for the team or how old the project is, although we've been doing this for a couple of years now. And, you know, the team that's on it right now, it's been about a solid year. But it's an old project, though. Like the IP itself, the mental IP it's old IP. The game world is something my family and I have been developing in stories and lore and bedtime stories for a long, long time. So it's a very mature game world. But what's interesting to see now is that the art and the writing and some of the stuff that's happening now is exactly as I've always imagined it, right? So it's neat when it's neat when something comes back and it was 100% proposed by another human being, and you look at it and go, that is exactly the game world I've always imagined. That's it. I'm looking at it. In fact, that's better than I would have done it, right, if I had your skill set. So that's where we are in the game right now, but who knows how long it can be, right? So I don't want to talk about details. I don't want to talk about timelines. I'm having a blast, and it's more about the process for me than the finished product. Yeah.
Also, I will be a shameless shill for a second, and if you need an affordable British nurse I'm very affordable. But that sounds lovely, and I think it harkens back to what you were saying. When you can have a team where the communication from person to person is very, very direct, that also allows you to not only convey the direct information.
Humble manga bundle, Monogatari returns.
Well, I mean,
manga and light novels.
like I say,
the
current team
was just purchased
the current team's about a year old, right?
51.
And what have we been doing this year? We've been synchronizing. We've been synchronizing our understanding of the characters in the game world and the story and the stakes and what's going on here. How many, and by every possible definition of the word, an indie studio, right? I'm not connected with anybody. It's just a bunch of people who are doing this for interest's sake. The only thing that's a little different than your average indie studio is, thanks to the success that I've encountered in my life, I'm not really cash limited, right, for any of this stuff, right? I'm just here to have fun and to make it on my own time frame and on my own terms. I shouldn't say on my own terms. I mean, the team is part of the storytelling here, part of the world building. It's not like I'm not a dictator, I'm not a tyrant.
True. You're in a very, very unique position, and it's not one that we often get to discuss, and it's certainly not one that, gets, this is why I'm so excited to have you on here, is that this isn't the kind of conversations that you usually get to have. Most indie team conversations is like, right, we've got 3 people and enough cup noodle to last a year and a half. How much can we get done? Whereas here, it's almost closer to, I mean, this is a bit of a hyperbole example, but like the Supergiant example. Like, you don't have to worry about having enough cash to feed your family at the end of the month. So it's like, what is your time frame and what can you do with the people you have? Your resource is time and creativity rather than cash. Although cash denotes
and do you
time
ship anything,
usually,
right?
But yeah. Because
maybe you never ship anything. You just have a lot of fun, hanging out in your tree fort, drawing comics with your friends, and you never actually ship a game. And maybe that's okay.
And maybe that's okay. But it does put it into a different creative challenge. I guess we've looped the same point multiple times, but like with the funding available, you could hire 100 people and go for a Hail Mary and bang it out in 2 years. But that's a very bad idea. You'd think people would...
I mean, what's interesting is because I've approached this from day one as the property as an IP and a story and the characters, as opposed to a specific video game, right? So from that source IP, I intend to make a video game as well as an animated series. So I'm not tying myself to a specific technology or platform or anything. I'm tying myself to the characters in the game world and the stakes and the fundamental appeal of the world and that characters, right? And so you spend that's the thing I'm most proud of on this specific project at the end of this year, is that all the people in the project are in love with the characters and the setting and the story, and they're really excited to be a part of it and tell it. Now, how we do that, great, but if all I have at the end of this is a really cool game work, a ton of art, and basically my own fan fiction about my own characters, is it fan fiction? See, I feel like I'm writing my own fan fiction for my own characters. I often feel that way. I wonder if authors feel this way in general. Like they feel like they're writing fan service, sort of, because for themselves, for the characters that they created. Does that sound like a thing? Does that make sense?
I'll have to annoy. I don't know if I don't know if I have any direct contact to any very published authors, but I feel like that would be a fascinating conversation, because I wonder if they do feel the same. Like, that would be fucking hilarious.
Are so real to me, right? And, one of my kids, I drive to school almost every day, and it's about half an hour there and half an hour back. And in that half an hour, we're moving the story forward, we're coming up with ideas, and then this person does that, and then that one does this, and oh yeah, that's really cool. And then you come home and it's kind of like you watched an episode of your favorite show, and then you said, what if the characters did this? What if the characters did that? Except they're your characters, so then you have them do those things. So it's really neat. It's like this family lore that we've been spinning for, that last decade, finally being distilled into a product. And, the stuff that really hits me sometimes like a hammer is the artwork. And I wish I could name the lead artist, and I wish I could show you some of the artwork. But sometimes, like, I look at it.
You'll have to come back on our show when you're ready and allowed to show stuff off. Oh no! However will we deal with having so many cool guests repeatedly?
It is actually, I would love to do that, actually. That's something I often debate, right? Like, I'd love to just show you, I mean, we could already do a couple of we joked that we could do the project year one, coffee table book, and it would be a big book, right? And I would love to just start dumping screenshots and concept art, and here's one character, and here's how they evolved over the last couple of years, and you see the journey. But I've seen, now going back to my experiences, I've seen so many people build up expectations so many times, right? And get people so jazzed and so invested in, oh my God, I can't wait for Project X or Project Y. And then it's 2 years later.
And there's nothing but a mist on the ground.
Right. And you took that interest and excitement and squandered it, right? People were interested. People were invested. Can they wait 2 or 3 months? Yes. Can they wait 2 or 3 years? Let's pick the poster child of this, Duke Nukem, right? And not only that IP ended up taking so long that the culture had moved away from it by the time that it got there, right? Like the original Duke Nukem, like when you look back, like so incredibly politically incorrect, right? And just looking at it going, gritting your teeth going, oh my gosh, I played this game and I like this game. But, that game took so long to complete that society had moved on from that.
Yes, entirely.
Point by the time it was done.
There's also... I don't want to derail the conversation because I am enjoying. There's also something very, very fascinating that if you go back and play classic Duke Nukem, take the problematic side stuff and put it aside just for a moment. Like the level design and what they did with the old, oh God, I always forget the name of it. The engine that was used for Doom and Nukem and Blood and all of that. God, why do I always forget its name? I'm a terrible host. But they did incredible things with that engine and made it do stuff that it was never expected to be able to do. And then we got Duke Nukem Forever, which was a very, very... Oh, it was the build engine for Duke. Thank you, Alnus. What we got from that was very, very bland in its like moment to moment. Again, you take the problematic stuff out of Duke Nukem Forever, it's boring. It does exactly as expected. In fact, less than you would expect from. And the expectations built alongside it. The one that I wanted to add was that what you can see with a lot of indie projects is they go hard on sharing concept art during like the pre-funding stage. And then they go to market to try and find cash. And then they're almost fighting against their own expectations because what publishers want the title to be and what they've implied it's going to be don't always gel. And either they find funding, but the project changes. A good example being Dark Sector, the precursor to Warframe. Or they don't find funding and it just goes crickets. And because of that, like, early hype they got, rather than that creating a fan base that waits for them, what it does, it creates a bunch of people that are already disappointed.
Right.
You can't then revitalize it down the road because everyone's like, nah, saw it, nothing happened. Don't even. Now,
100%.
you don't have that to worry about because, I mean, God, calling it a passion project feels like a disservice. You know what I mean? But it's something that is being created very personally and personally funded. So you don't need to do that, hey, look how hype our company is, please give us money, please, we need cash.
So I've actually thought about doing like a crowdfunding for it and just set the goal for $1, right? And say, look, the point of this crowdfunding is to give you a chance to have a stake in this, right? Okay. I'm not asking for $1,000. I thought about it, right? Build a list, get some buzz going. Look 2 or 3 months out from, an expected release date where you've got it pretty much locked down and say, hello world, here's our project. Oh, and not only that, here's a chance for you to get a little bit, right? I used to get in at the top tier of Kickstarters, like, get the featured role in the Veronica Mars movie or, get the whatever top tier reward in, a bunch of Brian Fargo's games. Like I got, kept getting like a Torment. For the longest time, my favorite game, it was Planescape Torment, the original one.
And I see you too are a gentleman of culture.
I'm not sure it's not now. It's just that there's been so many amazing games that have come out since then. It's hard to be the person to sort of reload from memory the person that I was when I played that game, and I don't have a fair comparison. So, if I say it's at the time in my life, it was like the ultimate video game for me. It was like, okay, wait a minute. Video games can be art, they can be literature, they can be more than thumb candy. This is a real thing. This is a real genre. This is a real way of telling stories. This stands beside, literature and cinema and all those other things. This is something that people will study in the future, right? So when the opportunity to get involved in Torment came out again, and they did it on the Numenera system by Monty Cook, I'm like, yes, I'm in, right? And I ended up being some really good friends with over the years with Colin McComb and Ray Valisi and Brian Fargo, because I got involved in that, and I was taking the top tier in their games and getting excited. And it came out, and I got a character in the game. Like if you played Planescape Tides of Numenera, Torment Tides of Numenera, I'm so sorry. There's a very non-trivial character in that game called Dracogen that you have to deal with in some way or another. And if you keep him happy, he can do good things for you. And if you get on his bad side, he can do bad things to you. And it was kind of cool. Like here's a sort of like a little avatar of mine in a not that I'm playing, this is in the game, right? So as I go through the world, and that was like a really neat thing. But I sort of went off track there.
That's all good. That's the great thing about Twitch as a space is that the banter is entirely welcome. And
going back just quickly to the, I just had to come back. Going back quickly to the crowdfunding thing. Nowadays, what appeals to me is the $10, $50, or $100. Get your name on a headstone or on the wall of fame inside the game. Like basically make a little mark in the game. But gone are the days where I'm going to phone up and say, hey, you didn't make your Kickstarter. Maybe I can do it instead. Yeah. I'm more of the feeling these days. Like, okay, well, if you can't make it without me, why? Maybe I shouldn't be getting involved, right? I'll be a part of it, maybe a substantial part of it. Like I'll throw in my ante, but I'm not sure I want to carry it across the finish line because now you sort of become responsible for it. And I will take one moment to collate all the negative experiences that I've had with all of the crowdfunding and financing and everything into a general pattern that I started observing that I really did not like. And it is this. You come into a project and you carry it across the finish line, or it wouldn't have succeeded without you, or you are by far and away the biggest backer, or it's not a Kickstarter project. You come in as executive producer and you put a bunch of money into it. Okay. Sooner or later, that project, 95% chance that project's going to run out of money. Who are they coming to for the next round of money? You.
Yes.
And maybe that's okay. But you have that moment where you're like, okay, well, I've already got X money in, right? The sunk cost fallacy. 5 or 10% more, that's not going to kill anybody. Now do that 3 or 4 times. Now you're like, ooh, okay. Or before you know it, maybe you've doubled your money in there. And you're like, well, they keep coming to me for money because they need money. And I'm not talking about any specific, like some of the names I was talking about a second ago, that's not them. Okay,
absolutely.
That's not who I'm talking about.
This is our Maflamp for Flamp fictitious Kickstarter.
Although this has happened multiple times, right? And in the end, you end up being financially responsible for the project. And as long as you keep saying yes, actually initially it's like you're the hero, but then after a while you're just kind of like, well, it's expected. Like you've done it 5 times now, of course you're going to do it a 6th time, right? And then there's this weird kind of reversal, like, well, if you decide to say no, what kind of monster are you anyway? What kind of person so invested in this project would say no to it? You're going to kill the project. You're going to kill the project.
How
this
can you do
this? This project has been running for X years.
Stephen, how could you do this?
So the first time that happened to me, I had this whole that scene in Zoolander. Like, am I taking crazy pills? Like, I'm the bad guy in this situation. Like, I'm the bad guy in this situation. Of course, the guy who said that was the bad guy in Zoolander. But yes. I digress. I was having that moment where, like, I've put in all this money over and over and over again, and it almost became expected. And then the moment I say no, like I'm setting some boundaries, I'm setting some limits, now I'm not responsible for getting the project this far. I'm responsible for killing the project, right? Like the whole psychology takes this weird change. So, at a certain point, I just started saying, listen, either I get involved at a small level and it's just, okay, you know what I mean? Whatever happens, happens. Or I get involved at a big level where I have my hands on some of the levers, right? I don't want to have my hand on every lever, but if you want me to have a substantial investment in this, now I want to have my hands on the levers. And even that, though, gets old because, okay, let's say you really are in a financial crunch and now your hands are on the levers. Now you're even
Yes.
Right? So
You're not just in charge of the cash, you're in charge of people now.
Right. So, and now you're getting back to, all the negatives that you've encountered in business, you know what I mean? Maybe concentrated into a single spot. So I sort of said, listen, I only have so many quality years with my kids, right? I'm not saying, they're going to hate me and never talk to me again, but there's this magic, between 5 and 20 where you can have a really amazing impact and relationship on the lives of your kids, right? You can be, I will tell you personally, from 15 to 20 was the toughest 5 years of my life, without question. The toughest 5 years
Teenagers
of my
are
life.
the worst.
So, I mean, it was the hardest. Like, I think back to those times and I'm kind of amazed I made it through. So, I said, listen, it's a very good chance that my kids are going to have some, is it going to be 5% of that experience or 95? I don't know, but I'm going to be there for them. I'm going to be around for that, right? And I get the chance to do that. And I know I'm incredibly fortunate, right? And at a certain point, my kids are going to go off and do their own thing. And will they call me once a week? Hopefully, right? But these are the prime years where I can hang out with them all the time, right? I can play It Takes Two, for example, which we really didn't like, and or Psychonauts 2, which we really did like. So, and hang out with them or sorry, here's a little flex for my youngest.
Oh no, go for it.
So we as a family love Outer Wilds. Love it. Love it to bits. And when I said earlier that Planescape Torment was my favorite game, that was my favorite game for that point in my life. I think I can't think past Outer Wilds. Like, I just get to Outer Wilds and go, well, that's my favorite game right there. That's it. I can't go back further than that. That's it. I'm done. It is what a phenomenal game. Talking about a small group of people making something absolutely magical. So my youngest, he worked over a month on making a Nomai costume for his school's costume contest. Went on the stage and nobody had a clue who he was. Nobody knew what it was. And he came home and he was all depressed. And I said, you know what? I know one word that is going to fix this: Reddit. So I went on Reddit, which I've been on for many, many, many years, and posted it in r/Outer Wilds. And it did gangbusters numbers. And the developers, the people on the Mobius team were going, this is an amazing costume. I can't believe how good this is. I was DMing with some of the developers and they're saying, please pass along our congratulations to your son. This is a fabulous costume. I can't believe how well it came out. And he's like over the moon. He's got Outer Wilds posters in his room. He was just having a blast. So, you know what I mean? That's going back to being a parent. That's kind of and we worked together, but he did 95% of the work on that costume. And, when I think back, 10, 20 years from now, that's the kind of thing I'm going to remember. I sat downstairs with my son and we made a Nomai costume that didn't do at all didn't do any numbers at school, and then, blew the doors off r/Outer Wilds. That's kind of a neat memory, right? That's the kind of thing that I'm going for. And if the game I'm making takes 2 years or 5 years, whatever. If I have a couple of great years with my kids that are super memorable like that, that's a massive win. However, I am going to ship this game someday, and absolutely will come on this stream and talk about it. But let's move on. Let's talk more about what you want to talk about, which is the industry, lessons learned, financing games, stuff like that.
I mean, all of this is lovely banter. I grew up in a household where my parental unit didn't understand games and were very much against it. Which I think probably led to my profession and, let's be honest, I've made video games my core kind of pillar as a person. So that's lovely to hear. And these are okay, that's why it was all quiet in the background. Sorry. I was like, why is it so echoingly quiet?
I put my glasses on and check the chat.
I believe... Oh. Sorry.
Reactor online. Sensors online.
Hookshot.
Online.
Hello.
All systems nominal.
I'll encourage
Big
these lovely
17,
Mother Hubbards.
we should start a team.
Hookshot, we should start a team. I will ask these lovely Mother Hubbards for questions towards the end. Wow, I think if there's a reason to forget the question that one had cooked, that being a lovely story about Outer Wilds is exactly the right reason.
Should I post the
Absolutely.
into the chat, because I'm on the chat. Sorry, my mouse went to sleep, so I'm gonna wake it up. There we go. Let me just pop it open here. Need a new tab. There we go.
See, this is why I am so grateful I have excellent moderators, because Caffeine has a wonderful question for you, picking up for my decaffeinated slack. So Caffeine was asking, having been involved, new words from Will, having been involved with both games and other industries, how do you see games impacting and influencing those other areas?
Oh, that's a good question.
It is.
I will answer that as soon as I figure out how to get the chat back. I've done something wrong here. And it's off the chat. Isn't that great? There, expand. Here we go.
This is also the reason why I love doing these things on Twitch, is because there's no qualms in just having a potter around, looking at chatting with people. It's not like on YouTube or podcasts where you have to be all zippity-zappity all the time.
All right, I just posted that. Yeah, I agree. Now, do you collect your streams later and edit them and repost them? And actually, you do, because I was looking at a few interviews you did, and a game I hadn't heard of, which was something about boyfriends that turn into weapons. That was a really interesting. I watched about half an hour of that. That was really interesting. And you know what? You asked. I can't remember the name of the person you were talking to, but you asked her a question, and you basically said, "What is your marketing budget?" And I will come back to the question that your user asked. I just wanted to this popped into my mind.
Oh yeah.
And she said, "You know what? Look, we're an indie studio. Our marketing budget is whatever we can scrape together." Wow, that is even for some of the larger studios, I think one of the biggest challenges that they face as well, because they put all this money towards developing a game and then they don't market it. And roughly in my head, I'm putting, for every $1 of development that I do, I'm putting aside $1 of promotion. Like, you can have the best game in the world and it doesn't get promoted and it doesn't go anywhere. Or, and this is perhaps more common, you can have a terrible game that is promoted extensively that all kinds of people play, and you go, why are you playing that?
Yes, they might be mad about it, but they all bought it and played it.
Right.
One of the things that I fight against a lot, and one of the things I try and instill when doing this, is like, good games don't sell themselves. Now, your marketing budget doesn't have to be like, pennies on the dollar or what have you. It can just be like time allocated, which is the equivalent. I mean, Hookshot's an exceedingly indie developer friend who their indie marketing budget is currently a bag of crisps and a pocket of dreams. But what was fascinating is that individual you're talking about was Victoria Tran, who was like a Forbes 30 under 30 now, is been brought on to work on Among Us and help bring that gangbusters.
Oh, very cool.
Because,
so how old was that interview?
God, it's like 2-3 years old now.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's...
And
very cool. Well, that's really cool. So that ended up being a success story for her. Well, that's great.
Absolutely. And it wasn't that. I mean, it was more a continued too, because Victoria became very known that despite the moniker of community manager, she was one of those individuals wearing every hat and got masses of coverage just based on her work. And that's one of the things that I like to point to. And obviously, finding your voice when it comes to marketing your game is a thing. And you have an interesting environment for the title that you're working on. So finding a way to market that game in a way that fits what you want to do, which is spend time with your family, like this rich, very, 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 very loved creation is like how you can convey that forward. You don't want to be doing meme TikToks and fucking, can you solve this puzzle ads on Twitter?
Right.
But perhaps there's a voice you can find that space. The challenge, of course, being that if you've got young'uns, you don't want to put them front and center. So how you strike that balance. Also, that Outer Wilds cosplay is fucking phenomenal. And shame on school kids for not knowing that.
Well, so through my, again, I was involved in the prop community for a while as a buyer, more than anything, and got to meet some up-and-coming people before they got to be big, right, as I was saying.
Yeah.
Through Harrison, for example, I met Bill Durant of Punished Props, and if you look if you go to the post and look down, I actually posted to his how-to on how to make that Know My Mask.
Yeah.
And it's a full foam build, and Punish Props has some great how-tos and follow-alongs and stuff like that. And it's what a great community. Like, I remember being a gamer when I was younger, and being a computer game, like, again, very similar experiences. It sounds like my parents didn't understand gaming. What is this? Is it a giant waste of time? And I'm like, I think books, probably when they came out, what are you doing reading a book all day long? What the heck is wrong with you? Get out there and play, right? You know what I mean? And now it's like, oh yes, literature, a worthy pursuit of any person. And how can you truly know the world unless you get involved with some of the world's best literature? So I think it's just a matter of time and perspective in many ways. Is Plants vs. Zombies, which is a wonderful game, is it a towering achievement of literature? No, it's not. Whereas, Planescape Torment, yeah, I would put that up against some of the best literature in the world. Absolutely, right? And the impact it has on you as a person. The agency, I think that's the difference between video games and literature. When you're reading a book, you are, you're taking the agency that is offered to you. Are you Harry Potter? Are you Hermione? Who do you associate? Are you like an invisible ghost watching it all happen? In a video game, they're giving you a role. They're giving you a role to play. You're in this game. Even if you're on a rail, it's still a sense of direct agency in the way that the world unfolds. Indeed. Right?
And the experience is conveyed in such a manner that it's not just the narrative is told at you, it's how you move in this environment, how it feels. Outer Wilds is actually one of the best examples, because you're just given this tiny solar system and just told, go. Now, the mystery is constructed in such a way that, as you start to scratch away at one part, it'll get you looking at all the others. It is constructed, it's not a purely random sandbox, but it feels like your adventure. But then you take something like...
And it feels that way for a couple of reasons. The story and the characters are so amazing. And it always amazes me when I remember there's no voice acting in it. There's no voice acting in this game.
Not at all.
Straight, text on the screen, right? And what another way to drive home what a powerful story that is, right? The way they do it without voice acting. Now, that being said, where would you even use voice acting? Maybe on Timberhearth, where you're meeting some of your friends. But once you're out into the archaeology part of the game, which is 95% of the game, who would be the voice actors? Maybe voice logs? I think it works better as the beautiful Know My writing. Funny story. All my friends I found out about Outer Wilds from I kept hearing on you've got to play this game, Outer Wilds. Well, this is when Outer Worlds came out. And so I thought they were telling me to play Outer Worlds. So I purchased and started playing Outer Worlds, and I'm like, this game's okay.
It's all right.
They're going on about the story. It's like, I guess it's okay. It's kind of like,
capitalism bad in space. All right.
You know what I mean? Like, kind of like another Fallout kind of game. You know what I mean? Sort of. Yeah. And I just went, okay, I put in 10 or 15 hours. I just went, I don't have time for this right now, and I don't have a lot of time in general. And then I heard it again, Outer Wilds. I'm like, Outer Wilds, okay. So I started playing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a totally different game. But you were saying earlier, when you're reading a book, you're sort of taking the words and sort of loading them into a simulation in your brain, right? When you're playing a video game, especially a first-person video game, you're experiencing that video game the same way you experience the world, through these little glassy orbs that you have here, right? You're seeing the world come in, right? Okay, it's through a computer screen, but it's still coming in and hitting the retinas at the back of your eye. Maybe nothing else is similar, but that part is a huge part of the experience. So a video game can hit you harder just because it's speaking to you in the same way that your experience with the world is every day, right? If you see a little thing like oxygen low at the top left, yeah, that actually makes sense, right? It's telling you a part of the story through the way that you would see it if you were wearing a space helmet with a little heads-up display in there, right? So that's something that, no, I'm not saying that, over-the-shoulder or third-person games can't tell an amazing story, but I think that's one of the powers, especially of Outer Wilds, is the sense that you really feel like you're in that world. You really feel like you are, when you get up out of the pilot seat, go over and put your helmet on. It feels like you're putting your helmet on, right? They get the sound and everything, right? Like you leave the ship and you hear your breathing. I'm like, it's just so well done.
When you leave the ship and then strangulate because you forgot to put your spacesuit on, that also happens.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. I love it when you do it on a planet where you can survive and you're out 5 or 6 seconds. You wait, I didn't put my basically, I guess that was lucky that I
Okay.
can survive here.
As
All
a quick
let's go
aside,
back to your user's question. I've totally evaded that question, and that's
actually,
not right.
I'm going to keep evading it for a second. Sorry, Caffeine. It's my show. Has your household done the Echoes of the Eye DLC?
Yes.
Oh.
And boy, were we worried that it was not going to hold up. That it wasn't going to stand on equal footing with the game. And boy, were we thankfully completely disabused of that fear, because it was
No, I know what you mean. When I heard that they were going to do DLC for that game, I was like, but the ending was perfect. Like, hang on, how are you gonna... All right, I'm in, I guess. And it was phenomenal.
I liked the little bit of retconning they did. Spoiler alert, I'll try to keep it minimal. Like when you show up at the Eye and you see the Cloaky satellite, and you're like, okay, that's clever, right? That's clever. That was absolutely phenomenal. And if you put the effort in to do the full 100% of the main story before you do the DLC, when that moment happens, the story that gets told is really phenomenal, right?
What I'm actually looking forward to finding is I want to find someone who plays it with the DLC complete as their first fresh run, no opinions, because I'd be curious to their feels. We have our first truly important question. When is Steve going to cosplay? No, I'll come back to it.
I refuse to take a question until we've answered the previous question. That's
okay. No, you know what? Yeah. The other one was just asking when you're going to cosplay the Big Owl Wizard. So, Kathy... I would absolutely love to do. I would love to do that. I think that would be a different level of commitment, right? Because now you're talking about building like a bust of an animal kind of thing with feathers or something. I would love to do it, and I've got the height for it. I'm 6'5", so I think I could try. It would look good. My son is the hatchling, maybe, and me as one of the big spooky. Get the big
visitors.
Opening more above you to scare children. It'd be great. But the legit question. So Caffeine was asking. So having been involved with both games and other industries, other industries first, and then involvement with video games. How do you see games impacting and influencing other areas? Yeah, it was a good...
Interesting. So, let's rewind the clock to, say, 2010, and I was doing some cool indie sort of video projects. And this is when YouTube was really starting to break onto the scene and becoming a thing, right?
I was working in film and television at the time.
Right. And people were going, how has this changed everything, right? How does this change everything? And you had people putting in some really, high effort productions that did well. Like I think back to The Guild or Legend of Neil or something like that. Some of the early things that were done on YouTube that were high quality, high effort, basically productions, like new media productions, with lighting and sound and rigging and actors and craft but just done sort of on a shoestring. And people are like, oh wow, okay, maybe that's the future. These little micro projects, right? And then a few years went by, and then kind of the reality stuff started taking hold, maybe a person in a room talking, or kind of like maybe the precursor of what you're doing now, right? The streamer, someone sitting and talking, going, well, hold on a second. These people have just as many viewers, but their production cost is 1% of that production. Why would we invest money in those if we can look for these, right? But that worked better as an indie model than it did as a production model. So, and in the end, what happened was it just went full Netflix, which is they seek out and find, and I think this is a long way around to answering that question, established properties. And then, with their crazy market cap, they just throw money at those and make knockoffs. So what I think is interesting that I see happen time and time again, both in the new media / video world and the video game world, which is an indie developer or a group of really cool, a small team of people create something really memorable, and they do it on a shoestring budget. And why is it amazing? It's because it's their pure vision, and they have to water it down because some exec thought that it should have a different ending or something like that, right? This is a team. This is kind of like what I was going for, right? One of the reasons just to step aside, one of the reasons I worry I'm never going to ship a game is just because I'm kind of having all the fun right now, right?
Yes.
It's all working with it and seeing it unfold. And I will ship a game, but I'm just saying, you get a team of people together and it's just they're having fun, they're gelling, they make something amazing, and then like with Outer Wilds, they ship it and you can feel the love in every corner of the game. And then people engage with it and it becomes really popular, it becomes an IP. Aha! Now you're on the radar screen of the bigger people. Aha! Maybe now we can do a sequel, or maybe now Netflix can make a series based on it or something, right? So, I mean, this is tale as old as time. This is, Disney's MO. Like, okay, find something that already exists, let's Disneyfy it and put it out, and, it's going to have enough name recognition that people will see it, but it's got enough Disney that we can sell figures and patent and copyright and run all our IP on it, right? So that's kind of where I say maturation. I'm not sure maturation is the right word because it carries a connotation that maybe it's better than it was, but you know what I mean? Like as a person matures, generally they're better than they used to be. As an industry matures, I don't think that's always the case, right? I think
True.
The maturation of this model is that small teams will always bust their butts to take the risk and make things on their own terms, and they'll take all the crop, they'll look out across the vast fields of creativity, and the tall plants that do well, they'll come over and take and transplant into the corporate gardens, and now that's our IP. So,
yes.
And I mean, that's probably tale as old as time, or at least tale as old as Disney, which is kind of ironic because that's a line from a Disney movie. Anyway,
I think
that, you know what I'm saying, right? So that's what I kind of see. Like Outer Wilds, they've got Annapurna as the publisher, right?
Yes.
And that is a smaller ecosystem, and I don't fear, not that it's my place to fear for them, but I don't fear for their future because I think they've got a very cohesive value proposition, good team, and I don't think they're being pulled out of shape to do something that maybe they wouldn't want to do. But I do know people that have done, again, no names or anything like that, and good for them in a way, that have done something on a relatively small scale that's got noticed, and then in comes, and that, like it's almost a fear of missing out situation, right? In comes Amazon and Netflix and maybe one other player, and they're like, I want this property. I want it. He bid $1 million, I'll bid $2 million, $3 million. Great. You know what I mean? And now it's sold. So great, you got your $3 million or whatever you got, and great. I mean, this is your brainchild and it's your vision, and now you get to tell the story to the world, and you have $3 million in your pocket or whatever. It's just, but I should say actually in the hypothetical I'm thinking of, the amount actually was $3 million. So,
that's pretty cool.
But then what happens is now you're in the corporate garden, and the exec before comes and says, I don't like the ending, I don't like this character, I don't think we should do it this way, and now you gotta watch your baby go into the meat grinder.
You have full creative control, but we'd like you to, would you consider
right
one of the interesting ones currently, and again, I don't think this is sustainable per se, but the current one is studio makes Creative Thing. Creative Thing does really well, like beyond its space. And so Microsoft has been aggressively buying these studios up and being like, look, we will buy you. You become one of our in-house studios. You just make the same thing that you were gonna, but it's going to be on Game Pass now. So it's kind of like acquiring these IPs to bolster the value proposition of their model. Essentially, just Microsoft's got deeper pockets, so they can tank a 3-year dev cycle, whereas the other publishers or setups can't. I mean, okay, Amazon have the cash to do it, but Amazon do not seem to know how to run their game side. But that's another story. So
the thing is about being as old as I am, right? Which is not old, but it's not young. Is, I've been through lots of market cycles now, like big cycles. And, I was around, it was the early days for us at XE, when the WorldCom and Enrons and everything, that was a big bubble. And everyone was looking around going, I guess this is the way things are now, right? Like just these giant companies that they don't seem to have any sort of financial constraints. I guess they're just going to eat everyone in the world. And what do you know? Something changes, there's an inflection point, there's a social stress, political stress, something happens, right? And talk about a time where you may have some political stress coming up in the next 2 or 3 years. I'm not going to talk politics, but I think any objective person would look at the US right now and say, there's very likely to be some sort of minor discontinuity in the next 2 to 4 years.
Like if we're just talking games industry, we need to acknowledge that, with the US being one of the largest markets, that this is a thing that all signs point to it's going to happen.
So when people get into scary territory, they get super conservative, they pull money out of things, they withdraw their money, and you get into a scary time, let's say politically, no judgment or anything like that. I'm just saying, you get into a weird time politically, people go, okay, maybe we're not going to spend that, maybe we're not going to do that, right? And suddenly things that used to work just fine, like things where you can just keep buying things up and making and printing money and stuff like that, suddenly that doesn't work anymore, right? And those changes, you know, as someone who's been through a couple of big market cycles, it's really hard to explain to people who haven't how fast things can change, how fast you can go from everything being 100% all right to, oh my God, like we're done, we're based, right? And it is really hard to describe unless you've lived it, right? You can go, like it can be a week and a half from, I don't know how this affects us, but that doesn't seem good, to we're out of business, right? And companies that are shoveling money into giant incinerators, right, to stay alive, companies that rely on notional valuations to be in existence, right? Companies that rely on people continuing to believe that the rocket ship will always go higher, that situation can change very, very fast. And I'm not talking about any specific company or any specific person on any specific Time magazine cover. I'm just talking
no one at all.
In general, things. Look, I bought a Tesla in 2016. I'm not saying Tesla's a bad car company. I love my Tesla. But things that seem to make sense, or let me put it this way, things that don't seem to make sense but continue to travel on as if they do, and people just get used to them, things like that can change really, really fast. Indeed. You know, a couple of margin calls get made, and some bank says, I need the money. And then that triggers a margin call, and that triggers a margin call. And soon everybody is liquidating things that they want to liquidate. And when everybody's liquidating things, the price isn't very good, right? So I don't know. I'm not saying there's going to be a crash. I'm just saying we're in crazy times, and I'm seeing some very big frothiness in certain parts of the world. And, you know, money that just seems to be this endless fire hose of money for new games or new projects or things like that, or let's just acquire this property, let's just acquire that property. I've seen things like that happen before, just the apparently endless money happening. And then some fundamental changes, even just 3%, and the whole axis is different now. So
if you don't
I'm not wishing this.
No, not at all.
But worried.
We would be negligent as an individual in the games industry, I would be negligent if I didn't acknowledge this. And Flip, hello, thank you for bringing a raid in. So Flip, this is Steven. Steven's, feckin', I'm just going to say it, feckin' legend. We're talking some games industry stuff, and we're about to get in some really stodgy topics, so pour a coffee, come on in, and I hope you've had a lovely stream. So this was the thing that I wanted to touch on, but I didn't want you to think that I just bullied you over here to talk about it. But like, we're currently in a feckin' feast period right now in video games. Sing? Oh, and Lost Flowers, thank you, the host. Like, lockdown has meant we're doing gangbusters, and I'd like to, hear your thoughts on. So there's two schools of thought at the moment, and I don't know enough about global financial situations to really comment on which one we're going into. But the two schools of thought are that lockdown has expanded the market of video games, so there is now more consumers. Because people have been stuck indoors, they've kind of been almost force exposed to games as an industry. And, with the uptick of like home consoles and install bases and digital sales. The other is that this is a reactionary situation, that because people are locked indoors, that's why they're doing it, and that when things return to normal, we're going to see a shrink, and that shrink could cause knock-on effects, like as you were saying. I'd love to know your thoughts on this one.
I think so. I'm primarily door number one with a little bit of door number two. So I think there's a ratcheting effect in the industry. I think that the more people that get into video games, the more people that get into video games. And while I think the amount of hours in a week that you devote to video games is a variable, the number of people involved sort of only ratchets up in one way. So as more people get involved due to the pandemic and travel restrictions and even just cost of living increases and things like that. When I was a kid, prior to the internet, being a big deal, or even existing, arguably, depending on whether you consider DARPANET and things like that to be the internet.
You speak the old words.
Yes. So you wanted to see people, you would go out and see them, right? And if you wanted to talk to them, you talked to them on the phone, which was an incredibly substandard experience, right?
Yeah.
It was like, even if the audio was okay, it was just audio, right? So here we are. I'm just north of Toronto. I can't remember where you are, but we're not close to each other, right?
Seattle.
But we are having 95% of the benefit of a communication that would be in person. I mean, if you were here, I'd offer you a scotch or something, and that would be that extra 5%. But or if you didn't drink, I would offer you a tea, for example.
I very drink. But I also enjoy tea, so it depends on time of day.
Right. So we're having, I don't know if it's 95, 75, we're having the majority of the benefit of an interaction now that we would have in person. And that was not the case. Like even 20 years ago, that was not the case. Even 10, arguably, that's not the case. So, my kids absolutely connect. When they're hanging out with friends, they're almost always online. Something like this, a couple of windows, they're playing a game, they're watching, they're talking, they're laughing, they're running through what happened in school that day. They're having the kinds of experiences that I had, possibly richer, without having to leave the house. And it's not that they don't leave the house. I mean, here in Canada, our vaccine update has been really good. We have, most, I think it's 85 or 90% of people double vaccinated, and we're well into the boosters now. And if you want to go out, if you want to go anywhere, you need to have their provincial guidelines and, vaccine mandates and things like that. And I'm not saying you should have those things too, wherever you are in the world, although I think you should, but we have them here. And it means that for now, we can, if the people he's around are also in his situation, pretty safe, small gatherings, right?
Yes.
And so they do from time to time come over. But when they're over, they're doing almost exactly the same thing as they are when they're at home, right? The kid will come over, open up a laptop, and now they're gaming together. And I'm like, that's 99% of what you were doing last night, and you weren't here. So that is something that, now you're still going to go out and see movies and do things that when, in post-COVID times and hang out and go to restaurants. But the things where you engage, you do team playing. My son's a massive D&D fiend, so right? Like, and I'll just to flex, I'll pull my old Dungeon Masters, like the original one, off the shelf and go, ooh. So because
multi-classing,
cool, right? I did it before it was cool. So actually, I shouldn't say that. It was really cool at the time. Just the number of people that thought it was cool was a small number of people.
Yes.
So. And I was in that group. So, yes, I think that secular adoption of gaming just across the board is always going to ratchet up. Now,
sorry, just to jump into chat for a second. Caffeine was saying, threaten to teach them Thaco, and Lizzie was just yelling, West Coast, best coast.
You know what? I have a lot of family on the West Coast, and I love it. So I'm not saying a bad thing about the West Coast. I've got sisters out there, my mom's out there, and it's a heck of a lot warmer than it is here in Toronto. And and it's, you got the ocean and the mountains right there in the same picture. So, you got to love that. I love heading out to the West Coast. I cannot disagree with you. West Coast, best coast. I'm not on the coast, though. I'm on the Great Lakes, right? Toronto's not on the coast. So sure, I'll give you best coast. No problem. Toronto can be best Great Lakes large.
Best lake.
So, thinking back to what I was saying before I got into Dungeons and Dragons, I do expect that as people come into the game, as games become more friendly, and this is another really positive thing that I think I've seen in the last, especially 10 years.
Yes.
All right, let's really rewind. Let's go back to the days of arcade video games where you put a quarter in and play a video game.
Yeah.
Punishingly difficult, right? Just murderously designed, just totally a mercenary design to separate you from your quarters. And that's fine. And, there's the odd game that you could single quarter. It was funny when I read Ready Player One by Klein.
Yeah.
He talked about single quartering Black Tiger. I can single quarter Black Tiger. I have video proof of me doing it on the main machine at XE back in the day.
That's cool.
That was I'm like, I can do that. But there aren't many games that you can spend like an hour and a half or an hour, 30 minutes, depending on what you're doing, with a single quarter. Very few. Nowadays, we slowly detach ourselves from the concept of pay to play, right? Oh, now I shouldn't say it. Like, you look at some of the, Candy Crush or something like that. That's absolutely the arcade model, right? Like,
Yes.
keep putting your money in, sucker, and keep, you might be having fun, but we're taking money from you the whole time. But now there's games like, here's what it is. Have fun. If it takes you 5 hours or 10 hours or
Bring
100
back
hours,
arcades.
or better yet, thinking back to, for example, maybe the best example of this is Knights of the Old Republic and Knights of the Old Republic 2. You're not going to get the full experience if you don't play this a couple of times. You're just not. You're just not going to get the whole story. You think you're revving, but maybe you're not. And maybe are you good? Are you bad? Are you not? Like, what? Like, what's going on here? Like, you got to figure it out. You got to get to all the parts of the world. Now, as I get older, I don't have time for that anymore. I just can't. I can barely play a game through once now with my responsibilities. So I do appreciate a game like Outer Wilds where you give me a prime run through that I can do, and I know I've done it when it's done, and I don't have to worry that I missed too much, right, and go back. But, when you're younger and you have tons of time, why not? Why not run through games? So when they sort of pulled out the sort of, we're going to continually monetize your presence in the game from at least some of the games, right? And it's just, you bought the game, now play it and have as much fun as you want.
Yeah.
That was a big moment. And especially with casual gamers getting in a non-monetized environment, really, really important. Now everyone's trying to get this sort of subscription model. Well, pay whatever dollars and just live in this world all the time. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of want to, like, one of the reasons I like playing video games is I want something new and different and a new experience. Like, why do I want to pay you $15 a month to always be in the same world, right? Like, I guess I like playing multiplayer video games some of the time if I can control who's on it. But if I just take a random sample of people in any multiplayer video game, it's going to be one of the worst experiences of my life. So
And
I want control over what I'm doing. So
I do wonder if it comes from that old PC mentality of always reaching out for that new idea. Like I feel we're still on those fresh horizons where there are still
absolutely.
Okay, it wasn't necessarily the best game I've ever played, but recently I played Blind Drive, a game you have to play with your eyes closed, where you're driving a car at full tilt down a highway.
Oh my God, do they have a big thing at the front saying, do not do this in a real car?
They do, they really do, thank feck.
Warning?
And you have to avoid traffic by listening and then just kind of careening around. There's Escape Simulator, which I haven't started, but is a group escape room game to be designed to be played online. God, I'm just looking at some and then of course Zalavir's glorious Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator.
Yep, I've heard of that. Yep, haven't played it, but I've heard of it.
Yeah. So I do agree with kind of the reach for variety. Also, very quickly, Flip. Fucking thank you for those bits, friend. That was $15 in bits, you legend. I hope you had a great stream. Sorry, I feel like I drove...
I want to answer your question, though, because...
I feel like I drove the topic away to Wendy's.
Yeah, so you've got more people coming in, but then you've also got more money coming in, and even without the money, you've got the ability to make a pretty darn good game. Like, the amount of money you have to spend to do that isn't crazy, right? If you look at... Undertale, or you look at, I don't know, pick a small game that's very well crafted and you just love. I mean, not even an Outer Wilds size, like something half or a third the size of that.
Let's go with Loop Hero.
That could have 1 million or more people, right? So you get a bunch of people together and you have a great idea. And this, by the way, feels like the early days of the internet to me, right? The 90s when we were building, you just have a good idea, you get a website together. It doesn't have to be the most attractive thing in the world. You just have to do something that helps people that was yesterday took them 30 minutes and now takes them 30 seconds. And you are a hero to that person, right? And then you just keep iterating, do it well, focus on the value prop, and move the ball forward. I think you can do that these days, right? What happened in the internet was just over time, it matured, and basically there's just unlimited numbers of people getting on the internet, right? What's different is that on the internet, okay, your idea is to sell books online or to make a currency converter, whatever it happens to be. Okay, the first person in does have an unreasonable advantage there because you sort of get some traction for a year or two, and then anyone else coming later has a difficult time to compete. Whereas in video games, it's like, okay, well, it's not like if you say it's like Halo. But is it Halo? No, it's probably not Halo. It probably has a twist. It probably has something else. Like, even if it's like another game that's come out, you still might play both games, right? Whereas,
Yes.
just to use, for example, XE, like in the early days of the internet, there were only a couple of currency converters, like a couple, and you'd use either one or the other one, right? Like, it would really be an either or situation.
Yeah.
But I mean, you might play 2 or 3 games that are almost identical, but have different stories or slightly different gameplay, or maybe a little twist or something, right? So, but what's the same about it is that you've got 2 sort of competing dynamics happening. You've got expansion of the market, but you've also got expansion of the offerings, right? And so, is the market expanding faster than the offerings? Then the offerings are sort of getting like a secular lift. Like, you know, one person played it last Christmas, but 2 people played it this Christmas just because the market is bigger, right?
Yeah.
But if you're having more games that are coming in, and all other things being equal, right? Like discovery and promotion and stuff like that, if the video game market goes up 10%, but the number of playable video games goes up 100%, well, now that's a net negative for you, right? And this is where we go back to, and I feel that's where we are right now. I feel we're right in that moment where there's a lot of money chasing, they're realizing the market's exploding. There's a lot of money chasing it. They're pumping money into it, even on Netflix, right? They're pumping a lot of money into content, acquiring content, generating content. And there's more content. The content is expanding faster than the audience is expanding, which tends to mean that you get a smaller number of bigger wins. Because how does discovery happen for human beings? Almost always word of mouth, even like on the stream. We're talking about Outer Wilds, we're talking about, you know, this, we're talking about that. I mean, that's why, you know, what you are doing is such a valuable service for people who create is what's the discovery model? Okay.
Yep.
I don't know what game, like, for example, I discovered the game that you're going to be playing, Iron Tales. I think you're going to be playing that later, if I'm not mistaken.
Tales of Iron.
I discovered that today through you. I had never heard of it before. I looked it up and I went, well, it looks really cool, right?
Right.
So how does a game like Iron Tales, or any game for that matter, how does it become discovered? If you happen to have a marketing budget, oh my God, you can punch so far above your weight, right? So if you have 40 indie games and one has a marketing budget that's $1 million, like, good night.
Yeah,
right?
good
like
night, the other 39.
Right, you're done, like, that's it. And I mean, that's kind of my, hopefully, secret weapon when I get to the point where I'm marketing the game is I can just spend money to do it. Now, I don't really need to. I'm just having fun making the game, right? But so many games are either people who just made an amazing game but can't afford to market it.
Yes.
Which is a shame, by the way, because it is hard to find a place that money goes further than on internet advertising. Says a person who sort of existed in both traditional advertising worlds and internet advertising worlds. Done right, your dollar goes a really long way on the internet, especially if you have a good community manager and you get people into a community and get them stuck in that community. But that's a whole different kettle of fish.
Hey, that's my entire bag, so that's a glowing endorsement right there.
Well, but then you know it better than anybody, right? Your job is to not just to tell people about a game, but to get them into a community that is supportive of that engagement with the game, right? And that's a tough nut to crack because it is so easy for a community to turn toxic. It is so easy and you would know that 100 times better than I would. So, by the way, props to all the people out there who work in community management that are taking an active role in keeping their community on a positive note, because holy cow, that's work.
It is lovely
so
to hear
critical.
that from someone outside of the community management circles. Like, that warms my probably now stone dead heart.
But not enough people have that insight, right? So, okay. But again, looping back to your original question, I think we're in a period of growth of the market. But I think that the amount of money being put into content is bigger than that. That being said, I think over and over again, people are making the same mistake, which is not promoting what they're developing and just sort of hoping that discovery will come on its own. And sometimes it does, for sure, sometimes, absolutely. And that's the problem. You can always point to, well, they didn't spend anything on marketing and they're a hit. Well, okay, yes, one in 10,000, right?
That's one of those ones where I try and do breakdowns of situations like that happen because more often than not, marketing has occurred. You just don't see it. So Undertale is the one I always love to point to, because the reason why Undertale succeeded is the bloke who made it was living in the basement of someone who was massively internet famous. Like, because for those of you who don't know, Toby Fox, who made Undertale, had worked on Homestuck, not just as a community contributor, but he'd done music for the product, for the webcomic. And Homestuck was an internet phenomenon, the likes of which I hope we never see again. As someone who read it all, it was a weird time in my life. I won't lie, but it meant that all they had to do for promotion was for Andrew Hussey to go, "Hey, here's my mate's game. Go have a look." And everyone Zerg waved on, and then it was a great game on top of that. So.
Right.
But if you didn't know that, you wouldn't see it. You'd just see single person makes video game that sells all copies forever. Right. And it unfortunately can reinforce some people's survivor bias of good games sell themselves. They don't. God, they don't. They
absolutely don't. And this is something that separates from good publishers from bad publishers, because when you sit down and talk with a good publisher, they understand it's going to cost money, and they understand it's going to be a long haul sort of thing. And we sit down with a bad publisher, they do a hand wavy like, but look at this, look at that, this was easy. And I've seen publishers, again, going back to the horror stories, I've seen publishers think very promising projects just because they totally didn't, they commit X dollars and then they don't spend it. Oh, we're saving it for a push next quarter, but it never comes, right? So
yes, one of my favorite examples of that recently is actually Apex Legends. And I know people kind of go, what? Because it looks like there was this planned strategy of like, oh, we're just going to release the game and then do a big spend. Nah, EA did the absolute bare minimum agreement. And they just, on day one, they just threw a bunch of cash at one streamer and a couple of others, launched a trailer, launched the game. And yeah, okay, I have nothing
business.
Yeah, but Apex did manage to succeed despite that, but like that's one of those.
And they'll use that as an excuse why they're going to do the same thing next time, right?
Exactly.
It's so frustrating to see people who should know better just make silly mistakes and then entrench on those mistakes. Like, you are going to have to spend money, or whether the money is, you rightly point out, actual dollars or your time or your ability to invest your own sort of resources behind the scenes that aren't dollars to get that out there. And I mean, hey, when we started XE, we didn't have a pile of money. It was in the 90s. And, we got some early successes and we piled our own time and effort into building that out in the early internet. And it was a great time and place, like good time and place and, good value prop and good product, but good timing too. We had a lot of stars aligned for us and that was great, but we put in a lot of time and effort and you don't see that. And then, fast forward 10 years, everyone's talking about you being an overnight success. I'm like, that's funny because it didn't feel like it was a nice kind of situation to me. Here you are in 2007 saying overnight success. I'm like, we've been at this for like well over 10 years now. That overnight doesn't feel overnight to me. So the nice thing about the market is today, if you have a great, and this has never been more true. Never mind how many people are out there in the pool of titles getting created. Yeah. The pool of people willing to play them has never been larger. So you come to this, in my opinion, with a good heart, with a good story, with a good gameplay experience, and you treat the user, the viewer, the player with respect and treat them, you know what I mean? You don't pander to them, you don't waste their time. You just give them a really pure experience that connects with them. There's really no limit to what you can do. A 3-person team could sell 100 million copies of something. They absolutely could, right?
Yes.
They absolutely could. And that's never been more true or possibly true at all than it is today. Yes, there's a lot of competition out there, right?
Yeah.
That's not necessarily a bad thing. It means you don't get the sort of free lift you do at the beginning of the cycle. You don't. But at the same time, you're also in a meeting if you are talking about funding or if you are talking about a game, rather than saying, well, this is something that's never been done before, you can say, okay, this is Halo Infinite plus Deathloop plus Undertale. I'm just making, that would be a crazy game, but you know what I'm saying? Like, you can, there's a lexicon, there's success stories, there's established parameters, and you can explain what you're talking about to somebody else. Yes. And at the early part of the cycle, you can't say that. You can't use that lexicon, and you can't point and say, well, they had great success doing X and Y. I want to do X, Y, and Z. I'm Canadian, so I get to say Z. So it's got positives and negatives on both sides. I do think overall we're expanding. I think after the pandemic cools off, hopefully after the pandemic cools off, there'll be a little bit of a constriction, like a second order, right? Like just going down 10 or 20%. But I do expect sort of the graph to go up and to the right, whether it levels off for, a while and builds. That happened too with just adoption of the internet. That's a curve that I was very familiar with at the beginning of back when we started the company in 93, the internet hadn't really taken off yet. That was really, and then there were these years, 98, 99, 2000, where it would almost double every year because people would get computers and connect them to the internet. And now, hey, another 10, 20, 30% of the people, like we'd come back in January from Christmas holiday and our numbers would be 30% higher. And that's all the people that got computers over Christmas, right? And that was just secular expansion of the industry. And that's where we are now. As it goes from being geeks and nerds and, gamer people, troll people that live in the basement. And people go, oh, gamers are awesome. I had a blast with them the other night. Or, it's like Among Us, where it sort of penetrates into normie space, if that makes sense, right? And like people who've never picked up a video game are playing it now. And you're like, yeah, good.
It's one of the things that we've been talking about a lot is I kind of describe like myself and the Longshipians as core. Like I don't like using the term hardcore because that feels like it. But like, we play a lot of games,
right.
we're wanting to spend probably like, 4 of our 7 days a week will involve some video game time. Right. Our knowledge and literacy is very high, and our focus on specific subsets is quite knowledgeable. But the thing is, like, a gamer is kind of like the sphere around that. And then around that are people that just engage with games. And it's so fascinating to be in that space. Sorry, I think I'm kind of driving the point slightly away from what you're saying. Lizzie was giving me heck for saying EA doing a bad. What?
Let's rewind a bit. And you have a group of people. Core, I love it. I'm going to use that with your permission. I'm going to actually start using that as to describe, that the spine, the sort of spine of around which the body of gamers are built. But core is a better word than spine because it doesn't sound as weird or gross. But okay, think about your sphere of influence, right? You've got probably a bunch of people who are like you, core gamers, and are going to game no matter what. And now gaming isn't uncool anymore. Gaming is kind of mainstream. Yeah. And you'll be talking with your friends, and people are social. And somebody who is either a casual gamer or maybe a sometime gamer or maybe not a gamer, here's what you're talking about. In a group, here's you had a good experience with it. Among Us, easy to get in, easy to get out, play a couple of games. Okay. I'll try that with you. Now, you are, right, evangelizing games. You've brought someone new into the flock. Yes. And the more people that are in that club, the more people want to be in that club. And that's where it really feels like it's crossing over in the last 5 years, but more now than ever, from, hey, games are kind of a nerdy thing, to games are just something everybody does, right? And I think one of the cool parts of being active in the financing space 10 years ago is I think I was kind of on the vanguard of people that had grown up with games and now maybe had a little bit of money and were getting involved in maybe helping other people make them too. We're well into that now, right? And you look at video gaming. I mean, video gaming versus Hollywood. I mean, come on, no contest at this point, right? I mean, you look at the head of studios, of video game studios versus the head of movie studios. Who's making a bigger impact? Who's making more money? Who's got bigger budgets under their thumb? It's gaming at this point, right? So, I mean, that's the tables have turned in the sense that, popular culture, I distinctly remember used to look down on people who played, you're in the basement, are you playing your games? Okay. Now it's like, hey, they're going to make a movie based on that game that I played. Oh, you're going to go and see it. You're going to go and see it. Interesting.
Make a movie about this. I'll be over here.
Right. Well, what's the new one on Netflix? It's League of Legends tie-in, right? So,
which, by the way, is fucking incredible. Sorry, forgive my
spoilers.
Really,
I haven't seen it yet. So is it really good?
No spoilers. It's the only thing that it does that I can fault it for is that you will know who's going to survive by whether or not they have protagonist hair. Okay. And that is its only misstep. It genuinely made me care about these characters that up until this point were just like, one was a... are they a, jungler, DPS, what have you, support? Right. Now I genuinely and emotionally care about these characters in a manner that desperately makes me want to know more.
Where does that comes from writers, and that comes from people who are engaged with the property caring about it, right?
Yes.
And I mean, that goes back to what I was saying earlier.
Very quickly,
Three-person,
though,
five-person team. Yeah, go ahead.
just Salen does make a good point. Fair warning: very mature themes, not for the youngins.
Okay.
Nothing
right,
nothing like old school heavy metal mature themes, but like some really grown up topics about, you know, the old human noodle and whatnot. It does not feck around.
All right, I'll watch it myself first before I bring any of the kiddos into the loop for sure. It's a really neat time. It's a really
yes.
I mean, I don't have anything, going back to my project, I don't have anything to prove to anybody. I'm just doing it because I love it. But I keep thinking to myself as I'm doing this, like, this is the game that if I weren't making this game and I found this game, I would be in love with this game. Now, obviously, you know, it's my own project. So of course, right? Like, although maybe not. Some people hate the project.
Very quickly, this is one of the reasons why I'm so in love with games, both as a medium and as an industry, is you genuinely do care. And the thing was, I worked in film and telly for 3 or 4 years. Actually, the reason I came into video games was during the last big financial crash. Film and telly just slashed all their budgets. Yep. And so I went from being like a house buying money guy in London to living on my partner's parents' sofa. It was a time, let me tell you.
So when I was talking earlier about things changing fast, you're like, yep.
That was one of those where I'm in the pub and someone's like, yeah, you hear about this stuff going down with the banks. I'm like, that sounds bad. And then like a week later, it's like, so you're fired, very.
Yeah, just like I said, right? The next week, you went from, I'd never heard about this before, to it is totally the most important thing that's happening right now.
Yes. And then I was in an oversubscribed market, couldn't get work. I actually ended up doing QA testing at like a minimum wage. But anyway, that I thought that was very interesting. But one of the things that stuck with me with film and television is that while you get some individuals that are passionate about their specific craft, there aren't many people that love movies, that love the movie industry. And there are a myriad of reasons for that. But the one thing that's carried me through in video games, like through hard times, through crunches and campaigns, through times where communities have turned on a dime, is that everyone around you loves what they're doing. And it is very rare to be in an environment where like even the stodgy money people don't care about games as a craft, and I love that. You know, it is a lovely thing that the thing that you are working on, you genuinely love that, and I think that care and that love is something that, because of the way in which we experience games, carries through more so. If that makes a weird sense, and I'm getting really arty-farty at this point, I might have to get the beret.
There are people in the, like, you go. So I think back to, you think of the big names that love film, right? You're thinking of like the people that made film that were in love with the medium and the ability of the movie, of like Spielberg or Scorsese, like people that genuinely love what film can do. And I think that there are people like that. They're big and small, but in term, like that story is now playing out in the world of games, right? Yes. People that have not been taken seriously for a long time and now have hundreds of millions of people in their tribe going, games, right? And here's the story I want to tell, and here's a way I can tell it. And guess what? I couldn't tell it in film. How could you do, like you could do, actually Outer Wilds would make a great movie, but it wouldn't be as good as Outer Wilds. Like it just wouldn't be as good as Outer Wilds, right? Yeah, and so much of what happens in Outer Wilds is, you know, the story trickling into your brain, right? In the way that you come across it. I mean, there is obviously a way that it's easy to engage with, but I remember the first time I played Outer Wilds, I totally broke into the main storyline through another sort of, not the way that I think the people had expected. I shouldn't say intended. They expected you to do it, but it was fine. It was fine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you end up over here, you end up over there, and it's slowly you're loading it. How would you do that in a movie? You'd have to rail it. You'd have to lay down that railroad and walk the user down, or drive the user down that railroad, and you'd lose all the sense of freedom and exploration. And it would go from being like that sense of freedom that you get in the real world when you explore it. Like when you go to a strange city, right? When you walk out of a hotel room and you realize, I'm in a strange city. I don't know I don't know what this place is, and I can't wait to explore it. Like when you blast off of Timber Hearth and you're in this, there you are. There's the whole solar system in front of you.
You're
and you're like, I don't know where I am, but I can't wait to go,
Yeah.
right?
I do like the new city analogy. Like because I always find that you, when you're visiting a city for the first time, and there's that first wonderful bar, or first wonderful little teeny tiny restaurant you find.
Yep.
All right, thousands
Taco truck.
Yeah, thousands and thousands of other people know about that. The city knows about it, but for you, it is your first time experience. You just picked a direction and walked and saw something that looked a little interesting, or
absolutely.
And
you know what's good for that, by the way? Pokemon Go. So I picked up Pokemon Go, and I will claim to my deathbed that I did it to have a shared experience with my kids. Didn't I read on your Twitter bio you have like 800 tepigs or something like that?
Excuse me, sir. It is in fact currently 835 tepigs. I've had to buy. I've had several. I can flash you the box. I'm going to move a couple things. So this is the overspill, and this is
it Pokemon Go? Because I'm going to friend you after this, then, and we.
Oh
can,
no! It is Pokemon.
Oh,
I have
Pokemon,
800 tepigs.
Oh my god! Like actual physical. Oh my god! That is so cool. Oh my gosh.
In my defense, I was very drunk, and Tarlicus, our one of the mod team here, asked me the question of like, if you were going to cover a wall with one Pokemon card, what would it be? And well, I said Tepigs. They've developed a life of their own. I'm probably going to artificially inflate their price.
That's a lot of Tepigs.
It's a lot of Tepigs. But sorry, you were saying about Pokemon Go.
Oh yeah, Pokemon Go. So my wife is Italian. She's from Sicily, in fact. And from time to time, we go to Sicily to see family there. And it's an old city, right? It was actually one of the original Roman city-states, Catania, in the olden times.
Oh, nice.
And it's been kind of the crossroads of the Mediterranean for thousands of years, right? So you were standing there, it's old. Like you get the sense this is an old place with old things and history, just like you were saying, that everyone in town knows about, but you just showed up on the scene there, bud. You're nobody.
Yeah.
So you can pull out Pokemon Go, and it's giving, okay, there's this cathedral, there's that cathedral. But last time I was there, I just went for a walk with Pokemon Go to see, spinning some Pokestops and using it as a bit of a guide. And it took me down this really janky sort of alley, and I thought, okay, is this going to be like someone's hacked Pokemon and there's some guys there that are going to beat me up and take my stuff, right? So I'm going to really narrow and
wake up in a bathtub of ice.
Exactly, with a Tepig card.
With one Tepig card.
So, there is this grotto, like hand carved into the side of a little volcanic sort of lava flow, tucked behind a building with a shrine in it that is like beautiful hand carved details. And it's just like on the thing it says like the shrine of St. Agatha or something like that. And you're like, well, that's not doing it justice. If I'd known this little magic, I felt like, like I wandered into an elfin glade or something, right? Like I was going to meet some hobbits or something, like I was just like I'm in a magical world right now. And it's like this quiet little place, like carved into the side of a mountain behind a building sort of, but you can tell like the building is 500 years old and this little grotto is like 3,000 years old or something, right? Yeah. Like before it was a shrine to Mary, it was something else, like for sure, right? For sure this dates back to the Greeks, the Greeks or something like that, because the Greeks were in Catania for a long time too. So, but it was just one of those moments where you're like, well, thank you, video games. That really was a gift to me, like an experience that I never, ever, ever would have had without, this sort of new medium, this whole new experience that this makes possible. Oh, hang on one sec. I'm just going to... Hold on one sec. I'm just going to get for one sec.
Not to worry. Fucking yo.
Yep, what's up? I did, totally. Sorry, I don't know if you can still hear me, but my son wanted to know if I talked about his
Heck yeah, you did.
And I assured him that I in fact did do that.
He has props not only on Reddit but on this site, twitch.television.
So anyone getting into video games right now, if I had advice for them, and actually sometimes I do talk to people getting into video games, I would just say, like, look, make something from the heart with
Stephen, very quickly,
quality. Yeah, go ahead.
Just while you're telling these lovely folks your advice for getting into video games, I'm just going to nip to the loo very quickly because I've just consumed an entire cafetiere of coffee to myself, and I desperately.
So what you're saying is you're leaving me in control of the stream, is what you're saying?
Yes, for good or ill.
All right.
For good or ill.
All right.
I'm sure nothing will come of this. It'll be fine.
Okay.
It'll be fine.
I'm going to actually look at the. This is a hostile takeover of Will's stream. That's it. I officially claim this stream in the name of Canada. This is now a Canadian stream. You're all honorary Canadian citizens until Will gets back from the washroom. People are. So, if anyone has any questions, let's not sing on Canada. Then I have to get up. So let me tell you an interesting story about Canada. So, not too long ago, because Canada is a younger country than the United States in terms of separation from the UK. And we did it kind of without a war, right? We just kind of said, hey, I think we'll be going now. And they went, yeah, okay, sounds good. We celebrated the 150th anniversary of Canadian Confederation. So we turned 150 years old. Now, we were kind of a dominion before that. Like we were kind of sort of separate before that. But, officially it's been 150 years as of 2017. So for Canada 150, there's a little logo on my sleeve there. We, as a country, had all kinds of cool celebrations and did all kinds of events to celebrate 150 years of Canadian Confederation. And I've been a pilot for a number of years now. And my father also happens to be a pilot, recreational. I, at the time, prior to this, flew fixed-wing aircraft. Actually, I don't know if you can see my little plane on the side. There's a lag in the feed. See. There you go. Okay. So, my father said, I've always wanted to do a circumnavigation of the world. So, I said, that sounds like a really cool kind of father-son bonding moment. Why don't we do that together? So we started planning in 2015 for a circumnavigation of the world, which we did in 2017 to commemorate the 150th anniversary of Canadian Confederation. So we flew a Canadian-made helicopter, a Bell 429. I can bring the model over here. This is actually the livery we flew it in. Let's see if I can get it on camera here. Around the world. And it took about 48 days of flying, 30 flying days, and 18 waiting for the weather to change
Let's get
days.
Stephen conducting
and
his
we
train.
Flew 8,000 kilometers. I've got the stats somewhere. I can pull them up later. Over the course of, we started on Canada Day, July 1st, 2017, and flew for about a month and a half and returned back in the middle of August. We flew east around the world. By the way, if you ever fly around the world, fly west, not east. So why did we fly east? We flew east because the prevailing winds are from west to east in the Northern Hemisphere. And as a helicopter, you're generally fuel limited, so you want to make sure that you're traveling with the wind. If I were ever doing a circumnavigation again, I would travel east to west. Why? When you travel west to east, almost every time you fly, you lose an hour in your day. So your day is 23 hours almost every time you fly. And 5 or 6 days in, that really adds up. If you fly the other way, you're gaining an hour. Your days are 25 hours long. So you get an extra hour of sleep almost every time you fly. And if you do 2 time zones, you get 2 extra hours of sleep. Whereas if you go the other way, you do 2 time zones, you lose 2 hours of sleep. So it really adds up fast when you go west to east, whereas if you're going east to west, you're getting extra sleep every night. And believe me, when you are planning and flying a circumnavigation, the extra sleep is super welcome. There's a million stories from this, and I'm sure that I don't want to hog Will's But I know this is about video games, but I just wanted to take a
Canada
moment
Sneak
to
Train.
talk about a really cool thing. If you want some more information, we've got a website. It was C as in Canada, 150, G as in global, O as in Odyssey.ca. C150go.ca tells a little bit of the story of the circumnavigation. We raised a fair bit of money for charity, and all of the carbon generated from the trip was offset with a Canadian carbon offset company. So I know it's not the same as not generating it in the first place. I do know that, but we did our best to make it a carbon neutral trip. So there we go. I just gave a little bit of the story of the circumnavigation while you were in the washroom.
Oh, way cool. These lovely Mother Hubbards have started a hype train whilst we have been chatting. Thank you all, you absolute terrors. Twitch is a strange place to be because I'm essentially... these lot throwing bits primarily is what has literally kept us alive throughout the lockdown. So, like, all of you, heckin' thank you. I will...
Cool.
It is. As someone that came from, like... I will say, as someone who did content for game studios and stuff before doing this...
Turtles are four reptilian heroes.
Favor 6.
Well, how do I throw bits? How do I do this?
Shredder.
Help me through.
So, next to the send a message is the little diamond. And
okay.
that is cheer. It's basically Twitch's like tipping currency. And the interesting thing is they do the Amazon takes their cut at point of purchase. So like Wolfgrad just threw in 100 bits. That's $1 to keeping my dumb ass alive.
Okay.
You are under no obligation, good sir.
I've never done this before, and I feel like I should just be doing it. So I'm just trying to. I've never done it before. Let's give it a shot. I just clicked a button. It offered me to throw a certain number of bits, and I'm going to. It's not coming up. I must have done something wrong. Okay, don't worry about it. Let's not drag the stream down. I've just got a spinny wheel, so nothing is happening.
Good work.
I think that's PayPal. I don't think it's you. I think it's PayPal. Let's blame PayPal.
Let's blame PayPal.
All right. I'll see what I can do here.
I get to grumble at PayPal because one of my friend's Christmas gifts got rejected. So I've now their Christmas gift's going to be late and I get to grump about it. Grumble, 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 grumble. Sorry, where was I? Well, all of you, thank you so much, alright? Fucking yo. What were we talking?
Really giving me a tough time. Totally not letting me complete this. All right, I'll figure it out later. Now, let me try Amazon Pay. I can just do it directly. All right, let's do it directly. I'll pull out my credit card and put it on the...
Fear is real.
Put it on the screen for everyone to see. No, I will not.
Our mod team is lovely. Caffeine was saying while you were doing battle with old Bezos, what is your preferred alcoholic beverage?
Good question. I'm a big fan of certain beers, but the problem is that I've sort of snobbed myself out.
I'd love to
of
play
beers,
the Discworld. Does that
you know
make
what I mean?
me a
I've
vintage gamer?
tried so many different beers and that I just don't really like beer unless it's super fresh and locally brewed and, you know, a certain way. So, you know, I'll enjoy a beer if it's fresh and local and in a cool social setting. And I know that, like, I find beer in bottles and cans just doesn't taste the same. I find that, like, a draft beer that was brewed in the last week is sort of the way to go. So any sort of beer I haven't had before that is a new experience to me, I'm a big fan of. I don't mind a little bit of scotch every now and then. I have bottles I've had for like 15 years that I'll sometimes, you know what I mean, open up and have a small tipple of. There's a really, really cool, I bought a bottle of something that I heard about that was something really, really neat called Uncle Nearest. So apparently, this is a really interesting story. Apparently, the Jack Daniel's distillery, Jack Daniel's of Jack Daniel's distillery fame, learned to distill alcohol from the slaves he owned. And he got all the money, and of course the slaves got no money or recognition for this. So the family of the slaves that the descendants of the ancestors that taught Jack Daniels how to distill have created their own whiskey that is 100% family owned by the family of the descendants of the slaves that,
what was the name
taught
of that
Jack Daniels how to sorry?
What was the name of that
I've got a bottle. Let me see. It's called Uncle Nearest. And if you go onto the site, you can read the story. And they don't name Jack Daniels specifically. They just talk about the story without naming any names. But it's, as I heard it, it was Jack Daniels. I could be wrong, and I apologize to Jack Daniels. I guess not the company. I apologize to Jack Daniels, the person, if I got it wrong. But if I didn't get it wrong and you were a slave owner that stole from the slaves they owned, then I don't apologize to you at all, dead person. So let me go grab the bottle.
Yeah. Ooh, you can get a bottle for about $60. Oh no, they're sold out. Okay, well, still, that's a hell of a cool story. And JPost, thank you for throwing the link in there.
Yeah, go onto the website. It's I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
It's a really, really interesting story, and it's a really, really nice spirit. So, you know what I mean? A bottle of this will last me for a year. I'm not a big drinker, nor do I wish to be a big drinker.
Our household is where booze goes to die. I'm a gin man primarily, but everything aside from, I guess, like ouzo, sambuca, not friends with those. Not friends at all.
Yeah. The Italians that my wife is related to always have lots of interesting and exotic spirits when I go to visit them, but often they're quite sweet. And I'm not a huge fan of sweet alcohol. I find it, like cloying. Like I just don't. It's hard for me to drink. Like they have some really interesting liqueurs, but there's this one called Liquore Strega that's kind of this kind of radioactive yellow kind of color, and literally means witch liquor, like witch, like riding a broomstick witch.
Yeah.
And Strega is Italian for witch. So, it's got an interesting taste, very aromatic, but it's so sweet. Like it's like sweeter than a candy bar, and you're just like, wow. Take about half the sugar out.
One of our main friendos here, her internet handle is Fire Strega, and
there you go.
That continues to make me smile. The last time we had a cocktail involving that, it was called Nobody Likes Strega, which
like the actual that liquor, the Liquore Strega. Yeah, it's.
Also,
I don't know. Did I?
If you'll forgive me just a second, to all of you that are in for the hype train, like, sincerely thank you all. Like, it's all of you seem to have acquired. Is that a hippo eating pizza? I believe it is.
And I have bits, and I'm trying to send you the bits, but the bits are not coming out. I'm trying to send my first bit transfer. Okay. So I have them. So I have bits. Now how do I send the bits to you?
If you click on the same old one, it should give you the options to throw it on in there. Also, Wolfcrad just wanted to add that you were correct. It was Jack Daniels.
It was Jack Daniels, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about critical race theory and things like that, and I don't want to get too political, but I just find this such an interesting little story. Like, okay, someone got rich by selling the very, very selling the whiskey that their people they owned taught them to make. Like,
yes, and
say we want about whatever, call it whatever you want. That's just weird, and it actually should be known that occurred, in my humble opinion. But that's just me. That's all.
I mean, I grew up in Britain. Like, there's very few places you can point to where the Brits didn't do something terrible of equivocant. But, oh boy.
Absolutely. And we in Canada are, to the extent that we are, come from the Brits, but also we have our, crazy moments of shame as well, like really, really bad moments of shame. And, I'm, as a person, when I have my bad moments and when I do things that I'm not proud of, I like to think them over and try to recognize that I did them and be a better person. It just seems to me to be the way to approach things. Anyway, let's move on to.
Oh no, absolutely.
Topic.
Okay, so Caffeine had another solid. Okay, Caffeine, you've just been banging out the good questions today. Like, thank you, dude. Caffeine had a solid question for you, which was that Steve, you talked earlier about how management can make or break a project. What skills would you call core to good management? But yay, feckin', and thank you, Steve, you feckin' ledge. Just threw that corgi into outer space and back, but thank you for that. Like, I didn't invite you on my show for cash, but I am very grateful.
It feels reasonable to support the cause, and also I've never done the bit thing before, and now I have, so I learned something today. All right, sorry. So the question what?
The question was skills that you would consider core to be good management, either IRL or digitally.
Okay, so abstracting to the most important skill, the thing about companies and organizations and projects and pretty much everything you'll encounter in life is basically the key to the movement, or to the movie Soylent Green, right? And the key insight that they have at the end of the movie Soylent Green is that it's made of people. Soylent Green is made of people. So this is every project, every company, every undertaking that you will ever encounter in your life is made of people. It's a group of people working together, more or less, hopefully more.
You know, I'd never thought of it like that, but I like it. It's made of people.
It's made of people. So being a good manager means being a good person, first and foremost, and interacting with a team in a way that lets them achieve their goals in the context of your project. And this is also, everything I learned about project management, and I don't know, honestly, how much that is, but I did learn a lot in my time at XE and managing a company. I certainly brought to my family, right? And I don't manage my family. I don't mean to say that. I'm just saying it's about interaction. It's about trying to create a space, both in a company and in a family, for the people there to accomplish their goals and to have agency in what they're trying to accomplish and to feel like you're all on the same team, even when maybe you're at cross purposes in some areas, that big picture, you're moving more forward, right, than backwards together. So it's the most important thing to be like in a project or in a company or any team is understanding that it's just made up of people and that almost every problem that you encounter is probably a person problem in some dimension, right? Like even if a server crashed, I bet you can go, like the game kids play. Why? Right? Why? And usually in 5 or 6 whys, you're at because. Well, in projects and companies, in 5 or 6 whys, you're almost at people. Well, the server crashed again. Why? Because we didn't update it last time. Why? Because I was too busy. Why? Because enough resources weren't given to me. Why? Because you decided not to give me enough resources. Okay, they're people, right? You just wired it back to a person. That was a person made that decision, and that person was wrong to make that decision. And now the flower is growing out of that seed that person planted at that time. Is it a pretty flower, or does it, stink and look terrible? So almost every problem in a company or a project ends up being the responsibility of a person. And it's almost never the person you think it is. It's almost always the person with the most power in the situation, and almost never the person with the least power in the situation. And this is a really, really difficult insight for people with power in a situation to process, that the problem is almost always with them. The problem is almost, he didn't do what he needed to do, or she didn't do what she needed to do in the time frame. Really? So how did that person know that they were supposed to do that in the time frame? Right. That was you that was supposed to tell them that and communicate that. Oh, they were too busy. Was that their fault, or was that your fault? You wanted to add something to their workflow that they were already busy with, and you thought they could just process that? That's a you problem, right? Almost all of the problems in business and projects come back to people, and almost all of the problems with people come back to the people in the dynamic with the most power, not with the least power. So that is my insight into project management. And, it's almost everything that I learned about business was if you make the business a place people want to go, with people they want to interact with goals they want to achieve, they are going to be able to find a way to achieve that goal. Once you agree on a goal and set the terms for the goal and articulate the goal and get buy-in and listen to, and once you as a group have charted, like set that goal and you chart that course, you're out on the open ocean. You're not, 270 degrees for 3 hours. That's not happening. The wind blows. There's a rock there. You got to move around it. Now, you're the CEO. You want to micromanage every little turn and run down to the engine room and turn the dials? Okay, that's not going to work. You have to know that all the people on that ship also believe that they should be going to that. And they're going to figure out ways to solve that problem or to solve the problems in their bailiwicks, in their positions, better than you will. And if they're not doing that, that's your problem too, because you didn't get the right person for that job, or you didn't give them the right resources, or you didn't give them the right training, or whatever it was. It's still back to you. If your ship isn't going the way that you want it to go, it's not your job to micromanage every little thing. It's your job to go down to the engine room and say, what do you need that you don't have? What is it you need? See, the other thing about projects is too, the worst managers in the world always create every situation with anger. What are you doing? Why did you do this? The best people that I've ever seen manage come and say, what do you need? What's happening? What can we do? What do you need from me? Do you need resources, time, more people? What do you need? What is the solution to this problem? And when you approach it like that, they'll tell you. And also you need to be able to take tough, I told you that if we didn't upgrade this server, it was going to crash. I told you that. I know, but we didn't have the resources or we didn't have and okay. Right. So as long as we all know, now, recrimination's over. What can we do right now in this situation?
Yep.
Okay, I think we can probably do this. I think we can probably do that. Let's swap out the drive and you know what I mean? People will start coming up with solutions if they've been dealt in as stakeholders with agency. And I know I'm throwing buzzwords around and I hate business buzzwords, but all you have to do is just treat people like people. Treat people like you would want
you'd think
a person to be treated.
You'd think this would be obvious, but this your entire examples there. I want to be the meme of pulling down the paper, the wallpaper on the wall, and just pointing to everything you were saying there. Because, when I think back on the times when things have disintegrated from a managerial standpoint, all of that would have solved it. All of it, The amount of times where if it had just been the what do you need rather than why have you done this, so much. Well,
there's so much business experience or so much business advice I've heard, and I can't keep track of who said it all. But something that sort of became an internal mantra for me that I still use to this day. I'll sometimes say it to myself is be kind, be kind, be kind. And I don't just mean be kind to people, although yes, be kind to people. But as a person, you need to really work, and this is really hard as a person, to be kind to the person that you used to be. So you made a bad decision in the past. Immediately, why did I do that? What the hell was wrong with me? Why did I think that? No, be kind, be kind. You had a limited amount of information. You have more now. You know more now than you did then. You were a lesser person at that time. Be kind to that lesser person. Would you hit your child because he doesn't know quantum mechanics? No, right? He hasn't learned that lesson yet. You're the person that learned that lesson. So when you think back to that earlier version of you, be kind to that person. He was working with the best information he had at the time and the best resources he had at the time, and he doesn't know what you know. Likewise, with projects and with anything, you get in a room and something is going wrong. Be kind. Be kind to the organization you used to be. Now you have more information. Hopefully you have more resources. You know it was the wrong thing to let that server go that month, but be kind. At that moment in time, you had bigger problems to deal with. Some client had phoned up and the installation had gone wrong and you had to put all your time and energy there, and you're forgetting that. You're forgetting you had to work with the prioritization matrix that you had at the time. Now it's different. Now that server's on fire. Now that's your top priority. Be kind. Okay. Don't get too mad about any individual person, but also you as an organization. When you make those mistakes, just be kind to yourself. Be kind. But more importantly, now that I'm out of the sort of active project management, it's really a struggle to be kind to myself, because I am always, nothing will show you your flaws and your shortcomings like having children. Nothing will walk them into the room and introduce them by their first name and sit down and hello, these are your flaws and character flaws and shortcomings and all the things that, you thought you were able to do but are not really able to do, and all your intentions that you wanted to do, but that's not actually going to happen, right? So, like they say in the Army, no plan survives contact, with opposing forces. So here you go. You have kids and you think you're going to do all of these things, and now here's what's actually going to happen. You're doing your best. You're trying your hardest to get through this. You've been a parent now. I've been a parent now for, well over a decade. Well, 5 years ago, I hadn't been a parent for over a decade. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know as much as I know now. So those are my two top level pieces of advice. Number one, business and projects are people. They're made out of people. Treat them like they're people. Look for the people in there and support the people. Get the people involved and invested and aligned. Listen to them. Collectively agree on the goals for the project, and the people will work to execute those goals. They will not, if you come in and go, blah, 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 you must do this, you must do that. People are not going to find ways to make that happen. Imagination creates reality, right? So you need to sit down, scope it, get it in the imagination of the people around you. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. Imagine it. Imagine it. So much of this first year on my project has been caching the world, like computer caching in the memory of the team. Get that in there so that when I see work that you're doing, I go immediately, that's exactly the world we're talking about. That's a corner I had never thought of before, but that is exactly what I would expect to see walking around this world. And when that starts happening in your team or on your project, yes, we've achieved that. We have people who are spending their own time, their own creativity, their own direction, their own agency to accomplish that thing. Now it's bigger than all of us. It exists sort of in our collective, not unconscious, in our collective imagination. Yeah. Now that's going to be, and you know what? When you screw up, when you fall flat on your face, when you realize you made a mistake, be kind to the people around you at the time. They're doing their best, but also be kind to your team and you and the people on it. Be kind to who you used to be. Realize that nobody there is probably acting with malice. They're just doing their best, and they were doing their best at the old time too. So there you go. You want to read some books, Lean Startup and The Hard Thing About Hard Things. If you're getting into business, those are the top two go-to books that I always point out to. The Hard Thing About Hard Things, I'll spoil the book. The hard thing about hard things is nobody's done what you're doing before. So as you get into business and build something that's completely new and do something completely new, it's really hard to look to other companies for examples because you're doing something for the first time. So you're always going to be charting a certain amount of your own course. I'm vastly oversimplifying the book. And the Lean Startup is exactly what we've been talking about, the concept of don't work the 80-20 rule, try to get a minimum viable product and iterate from that. And little teams can accomplish things that big teams really struggle to accomplish because they have that cohesiveness. Yes. That traction that I was talking about just a minute ago comes really naturally 5, 10, 20 people. Above 20 people, it is really, really, really hard to do that. It's really, really hard to get everyone. You're better off breaking up into units of 20 people and running them sort of autonomously at that point, in my opinion. All right. Hopefully that answered the question.
No, that was exceptional. And be kind to yourself. That is one that I absolutely fail at. I am definitely I'm the monks from Monty Python with the face slamming board when it comes to
be kind.
Yep. So I'm gonna that's what I'm personally gonna try and bring into bear, and also the things you were saying about no one's done this before. Oh boy, that's another one that hit like a brick.
No one's done it with your team, even if someone's done something like it before, they didn't do it with the tools, with the people, with the situation, the moment in time, the geography. No one's done that.
And God, that is incredibly valuable.
Again, here's something I work on because, I'm like humans. I am stuck in the human condition, which is an amazing, wonderful thing and sometimes terrifying as well.
Yes.
Sometimes you have those moments where you think back and you're just, why did I do that? Why did I do that? Why did I say that? Why did I do that? Oh my God, what was I thinking? What will people think of me? That's that. Be kind. Just say that to him. Be kind to your old self. He was a good guy. He was trying his best. Even when he screwed up, he was he was a good guy. If you met him, you would, like, if you could walk and meet your 2 year ago self, that person, right? No, he's a good guy. He's trying to, he's trying to do his best. He doesn't have all the information I have. You'd invite him out for a coffee.
Yeah.
Treat the memory of yourself with that kind of respect and that kind of, care.
And yeah, that is one that I am going to prescribe to as best I can.
Look, we're all just figuring things out as we go. These are some little life hacks that I've come up with, or I shouldn't say that. None of these have been my innovations. They're just things I've pulled together from reading books and talking to people and stuff like that. Yeah, I have this incredible envy for the people that walk around the world in this sort of state of Zen-like calm, right? And it's funny because then, you talk to those people and they're going, I'm not calm, dude. I'm freaking out.
Yeah, just not showing it.
You're just doing right.
Oh, lordy.
Okay, let's talk about games. What else are we doing here?
Hells to the hells, yes. Let me see if there's any other bangers in there. I think Caffeine was agreeing with you because Caffeine was saying that in the last 6 months of their master's degree, Caffeine's working in museum sciences. And the managing of volunteers and other staff has become a very real thing that Caffeine might have to address in the near future. And Phase 6...
volunteers and charity.
Yeah.
Double down on this, on the Be Kind, right? Because these are people that, sometimes people get trapped in jobs that they don't like because they need the money and they can't leave, right? And I hate when people take advantage of that, but it happens all the time. Hey, in charities and volunteering, the moment they encounter some sort of negative situation, goodbye. You know what I mean? Like, they have no reason to be there.
Yes.
There are situations sometimes it's like a social circle or friends or something like that, right? And there's an investment in that sense. But yeah, no. If you can't do it in a paid environment, you can definitely not do it in a volunteer environment. But the cool part about the charity thing, the sort of gimme for that one is you kind of get pre-buy-in on the goal. Like everyone's there because they want to be. So I taught a course, this was a long time ago, at the University of Toronto, and it was an adult education course. And I'd never taught an adult education course before. It was entrepreneurial skills for internet consultants. This was back in the day when everyone was going to be a web designer and stuff. And
yes. A mystical time.
It was cool. It was late 90s, early 2000s. And what I loved about the course is everyone came in there and they're like, I want to learn. I'm paying money and taking my night off to learn about this. I want you to teach me and I'm here to learn. And it was just like this cool energy. Every time I walked into everyone's like, tell us, what can you tell us? I'm like, well, here's what I know. I can't tell you I know everything. I don't care. Tell us what you know. Okay, here we go. So that's the cool part about the charity. It's like, if you hire someone, they might be there for the paycheck, and then you sort of have to get them on alignment with the corporate goals or your goals as a team. Charity men, like, I love this charity. I want to support this charity. You got the pre-buy-in on the goal. So you kind of got a trump card in your hand to start with, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know that they've bought into the vision. They're there for emotional, personal reasons, not because they're, in economic need or something, right?
Yeah.
So, but the flip side is that if you ruin the environment, if you ruin the social setting, if you ruin the enjoyment for them, there's nothing to hold them there either, right?
Yes.
So I think you're going to be good. The fact that you're asking a question like that is the best sign in the world. Like, that's the difference between somebody who is improving and is a genuinely good person. They're always asking themselves, am I a good person? I said this to my oldest about this time last year, right? And they're sort of stressing, like, am I a good person? I said, who agonizes over whether or not they're a good person? A good person. Do you know who never asked themselves that question even a single time?
Bastards!
That person. He's like, okay,
it's
that
so
makes
right.
sense.
One of the funny things that does make me laugh about this is the reason that Caffeine and I started working together on this whole corner of the internet was I was running a different show in a different corner of the internet, and I had an idea and kind of got in over my head and kind of sort of press ganged Caffeine into basically running logistics for an online game as it was happening live, which he kicked ass at. And that's how him and I ended up being friends.
Oh, wow.
It was one of
Brothers
those
in arms, like, okay, into the foxhole, live fire training.
little bit. It was one of those like survival zombie style games. And we had lots of people in the same space all spread out. So Caffeine ends up playing like mission control, like trying to get everyone to locations, being like, all right, these two people are over at this town. Right, you need to go over to the bridge. There's going to be a trailer park. You're all going to meet there. Yeah. And for some reason, Caffeine stuck around after that. It's been 3, it'll be 4 years in April. This has been a thing. God, that blows my
That
tiny
is really
mind.
cool. Well, congratulations. That's really cool.
And I am so lucky to have people like, Caffeine and Lizzie and Parl and Moose, and even the people who don't hold a green sword who spend time in this space, because they're essentially volunteering their time in a corner of the internet to make it a better little place. And I'm gushing now. All right, there you go. I'm gushing about you lot.
You know what? The other thing, I'm just going to tack on a number 3 to my life advice. It is not just, a lot of people feel reticent to sort of, talk about their successes, right? It is, in a team, it is absolutely mission critical as a team to celebrate your successes. And I don't mean like have a party, although you can have a party. I just mean when something goes well or when something doesn't go quite as badly as it could have gone, to say, that was amazing. And not only that, replay the tape and kind of rewind it. If you think back to the time that you were in grade school, right? 10 years old. When you were telling a story to your friend, whether it was what you saw on television the night before or something that happened to you, it's this rich oral tradition kind of story. And then I did this, and then I did that. I truly believe that we as humans are really conditioned to, because long before we had television or anything like that, the stories the sort of narrative that bound us was the one that we created amongst ourselves, probably in groups about 10, 20 people, right?
Yeah.
We might be in a larger context, but people always tend, like you look around at a group of people where you feel really comfortable, it's almost always 5 to 20 people, right? Beyond 20, it starts to get a little bit out of control. So I just mean, you don't feel like you are really meaningfully, like if you're at a party with 50 people, you're still going to break into groups of 5 people or 10 people, right? And
true.
Even if that changes. So I think we are hardwired to have that oral tradition amongst small groups of people. And that is like whether it's 10,000 years ago and you're hunter-gatherers on a plane trying to survive another week, or whether you are trying to get a little indie game going, or whether you're trying to manage a group of volunteers. I mean, it's really, you're working with the same hardware. You're working with the same, like, it's not like humans are radically different than they were 10,000 years ago. So
There's
you're
a couple
still
of
using
software
the same
upgrades, but the meat and bones
Right.
is pretty much the same.
Yeah, we got a bunch of viruses too, and all kinds of stuff. And I mean, like, you know what I mean? I mean, like, mini virus, information. Like, we've got a lot of stuff in there that, the computer's running slowly because we have too much stuff running. So, when you connect with people and create a narrative, an oral narrative around, like, the epic of what you're doing, not the epic of Gilgamesh, the epic of you, what you're doing, the epic of this project. Well, that partly happens automatically, but then to sit down, have a lunch, once a week or whatever, sit down and reconnect the threads of that story. This week I had this and the customer called and they had a bad experience and boy, I pulled it out of the fire by doing this. Oh, that's amazing. Congratulations. That little moment is just a thread in that fabric, right? And people are social.
I'm
I'm
legit
an
taking
introvert.
notes here. I'm legit taking notes. This is some great
You would
stuff.
never know it to look at me, but I am total introvert. I'm one of those light switch introverts that in social situations can sort of flick it on, but then my recharge time is almost always alone. And so, but I'm definitely high energy, but I'm definitely more of an introvert than an extrovert. I can, how they talk about running like Windows on Mac or Mac on Windows? I can run extrovert on introvert. If that makes sense. I'm running extrovert simulation mode on introvert software. So, but the hardware underneath, it's the same hardware. And we respond viscerally, we respond emotionally to storytelling that involves us and the tribe around us, the people in our group, the people in our tribe. It is, when you leave a workplace, when you leave a group, when you graduate from a school or something and you move on to the next part of your life, I mean, you're always excited, but you're always you're feeling a loss. You're losing a tribe of people, like a group of people that is a predictable source of social support and things like that. And we are, I mean, for thousands of, however long you want to say, our survival, prior to the industrial age, depended on interaction with groups of people to survive. Like, yes. I'm not going to gather enough berries or hunt enough meat on my own. I'm not going to cut enough corn on my own to survive. I'm not going to. Sure, now in 2021, I might write enough copy, or might have enough stream subscribers to survive. But this is a whole new thing. This is people have only been islands for very small amounts of time. Now, obviously, you're still externalizing all the things that have to be done, but I think even the introverts of the world, and I say this as an introvert, are designed to find a place inside that community. And stories are how that happens.
I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, as we move kind of more and more into the age of like the digital tribalism, which I am not necessarily against, as someone who's grown up in online communities.
Depends what you mean by it. Yeah, 100% agree with you.
In some digital tribes, the story is the game. If you go to a fan community based around that, that's the story that brought you together.
Right.
If it's a single player narrative title, you won't always just be talking about that one thing, but that was the story that brought you all together. And then the connections you form there. With community management, it's fascinating because, we often talk about, what is the story? What is the tale you're telling? Be it, the tale of new content coming, or the tale of here's all the cool shit that everybody's doing. And that's something that I try and carry through. I'm not as good at it doing this as I could be, because I'm still getting used to the idea of there isn't an IP or a brand or a story between me and these lovely Mother Hubbards. Also, Nispadden got a laugh out of me saying, I could totally get enough berries on my own. Just watch me. I'm a bit of berry master.
Well, and you know what? Maybe there is that berry master out there who would totally survive on their own. But then the lion would get them at night because there's nobody on watch.
Yes, because they're too tired from catching berries all day.
Exactly.
And I really do like those ideas. Fucking hell, we've talked a lot about like the effect of lockdown on video games, but if we just take a step back, like lockdown has made us all digitally more social. Throughout lockdown, I'm just going to use a few examples from us over the long ship, but Rhymes with Moose was running a coffee morning just for like people to just sit, have a coffee, have a natter while they're working on stuff. Caffeine and Tal have run varying gaming servers. One of my favorite things to do is a YouTube playlist to watch as a group, because what I do is I stick in old 90s and 80s toy commercials in just to give that feeling of like Saturday morning. Last year,
that's brilliant.
Yeah, well, mostly it's to do specific people a damage. I managed to find the Land Before Time Pizza Hut commercial because I know it messes up Fiona, my partner. So there's a little bit of bastardry to it.
Oh my god, I remember that. That's terrifying, though.
Also, so Saidlin's basically been like our sync tube DJ, using a frankly terrifying knowledge of music to craft these kind of like either just like party out with friends evenings, or these kind of like lo-fi DJ to chill to. We've even got to the point now where we're putting challenges in, where it's like you can only pick from like a certain genre or that evoke a certain idea. I mean, Lizzie, you've been kicking ass left, right, and center. But I was, and again, as always, feckin' thank you. But the reason I wanted to highlight those is that this kind of like, digital environment is something that was born out of necessity from the last couple of years. And while I've been bad for it the last few months, it's a thing I want to keep going. Like, all of G Gundam and the original Transformers is on YouTube to watch legitimately. That doesn't contain virus links in the descriptions.
Super pumped, by the way, to come across Battleship Yamato.
Yes!
Online, the whole darn thing. And boy did I get, I mean, you can actually see the whole series, but the super, basically the movie that's a super cut of the series where they cut out all the worst and embarrassing parts of the series. It was, it's amazing. There are parts of that when you watch it again, you remember the top of your brain blowing off, right? As a kid, like, oh, God, that's cool. Yeah, it's a neat time. It's a neat time to be alive. There's certainly a lot of stuff out there, but we seem to organize it into, like you say, tribally. I mean, there are negative connotations to tribes too. I think a lot of time tribalism means you sort of buy in without too much thought to some sort of worldview and sort of just go along with everybody else. But I think tribalism, in the sense that you're using it, the positive term is small groups of people. You're in a, like, because I think that the kind of tribes that were very functional, I shouldn't speak about anthropology. I should just talk about the kind of groups that I've seen work really effectively are that 5, 10, 20 person, let's not call it tribe, let's call it a group, right? And having that, because I think tribe comes with some negative connotations that, especially in COVID, not being able to get out as much or at all, for long periods of time, and you go, here's a place where you can do it. You can actually connect with people. Yeah. And I mean, part of being a group isn't just hearing the stuff that you expect to hear, it's hearing the stuff that you don't expect to hear, the new story, the new perspective, right? And a good group, a good tribe has a mix of both of that in it.
Yes. I also, I understand that while I wouldn't call myself in charge of this operation, I'm the promoter, the meaty megaphone. So there is a responsibility to myself to set the base and the pattern, but I don't want to drive it too far into the ridiculousness. It was just more that digital community is now a big part of everyone's lives.
Yeah, digital community, yeah.
Everyone's learned how to use Zoom. Everybody's on Discord now, or part of some. And that is...
Let me talk about Zoom for a second. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Zoom, isn't that amazing? That went from being basically no one's ever heard of Zoom.
Yes.
And it's not like we didn't have Zoom analogs, like Skype and a million other things, right? It's just that, what did Zoom do? They basically took as much of the friction out of the process as possible. Look, just click on this link and it'll start, right? Because I remember everyone has been in a situation where prior to Zoom, and sometimes even on Zoom, you're clicking, I can't hear you, I can't see you, adjust the camera, do that, do this. That one company came along at a moment in time and said, we're just going to make it half as difficult. I'm not saying it's always going to work perfectly, but here it is. Here's my value prop. It's not as hard as the other ones to use. And everyone just went, sold.
Done.
Everyone uses Zoom. Unreal. Kudos to those guys because, well, I don't know their guys. Kudos to Zoom because, wow.
One of the... sorry, I'm just going to drive the topic right off road at this point, but one of my go-to hangouts throughout lockdown has been the games industry gathering, which uses the breakout rooms function of Zoom as a socializing setup, and it's been feckin' brilliant. So you all get thrown into a big Zoom call, and then you are sectioned off randomly into groups of 5 with other people from the games industry of
interesting,
varying skill levels, varying disciplines, and it works great because the 5-person conversation, it's spot on. Either everyone can have a voice. If someone wants to kind of take a step back, it doesn't feel echoingly quiet like it does with 3.
Right.
And it has been a wonderful, wonderful tool. Now, the reason why I wanted to add that is on the things we were talking about earlier, with the expansion of video games, the expansion of these digital communities is also a thing that I think is going to stick with us. Even though a large proportion of the individuals who attend the games industry gathering are in regions where the rate of vaccinations is really high, people are getting boosted, it's safe for them to go outside. But yet still, on those Fridays, though it's once a month now rather than weekly, but on those Fridays, I will take time away from everything else to go spend time there. And you know what? It's getting... Sorry, just Hookshot says, Hookshot went anything from 0, Hookshot, to 10, Will. I'm a very social person, I won't lie. And yet, Faber6 makes a good point that Discord also took a bunch of features from varying other places and put it in one space. Easy 100%. Voice chat, easy video chat, a comparable forum-like environment that also takes kind of the sting out of forums.
Absolutely. I'm a huge fan of Discord. And one of the things that it does so much better than the other things that I've ever tried is screen sharing. Because so many other times you're sharing a window. If I'm working with an artist on the project and I want to do some review, I share a screen and I know whatever I do in that screen, we're going to see it. if I'm using something else, I'm almost always inadvertently sharing the window of the app, and then when I close it, screen sharing is over. I'm like, what?
Wait, no, I just wanted to show this other thing over here. Yeah.
Right. And now I'm firing it up again, and it Discord, as we're using now, right, to communicate. I love it as well. It's a lot bigger now in terms of feature set than when I started using it, and so I'm starting to feel that familiar kind of like, well, I remember when this was really easy to use, and now I'm always finding something new that I didn't know. Or you're like, okay, I want to change this setting, and it takes you 3 minutes to try and figure out where it is, right? No, is it under here? Is it over there?
Yeah.
What part of the screen is it on? But I mean, that's any sort of maturing software product.
But like for us over here, like the Longship is kind of like the name we ended up giving our little community, our Discord, our space.
That's a great name.
Yeah, thank you. And it's ended up being like our little digital home, and I feckin' love that. But that's kind of me as a, being a community manager, working on other people's products. I always loved the idea of creating something from the ground up that was separate from an IP, but with a real good, tight-knit group of people. And we've feckin' done that. Sorry, at this point, I'm just tooting my own horn. Sorry.
As I said earlier, it is appropriate to do that. It is important to do that. And it is important to do it in a positive way that ties the community together, to celebrate your successes, to celebrate the achievements of the community. You look back to, again, going back to sort of anthropology, you look back to harvest festivals, you look back to winter festivals. It's like, hey, we survived another year. Can you believe it? Hey, look, the days are getting warmer now. The sun's up more now. You know what I mean? We made it through the worst part. And that should happen inside projects and companies and organizations as well. Like, wow, hey guys, we hit a X number of subscribers or X number of views, or, oh man, we survived that server crash. Can you believe it? It's celebrate, right? It is very appropriate to do that. That's what makes a community cohesive. I think I'm going to have to get going shortly. I'm not right now, but if we can
no worries.
wind down my.
So, friends, let's
say 10 minutes.
In the words of Abraham Lincoln, let's fucking do this. If you have any questions for Steve, now is the time. If you wanna at Viking Blonde, just so I see him popping up, and I can play host, question deliverer. Before we have to say goodbye, though, Steve, this has been feckin' glorious, and this will not be the last time we have a chat. Caffeine wants to throw in a quick speed question. Favorite D&D character race? Class race.
It's really interesting. So now, what D&D are we talking about? This is the question, right? Are we talking old school?
You know what? I'll let Caffeine add a modifier to that one.
Yeah.
Oh, so Asari was asking.
That's another one, yeah.
Classic game.
But let me do my best to answer Caffeine's question there. So,
okay.
in the early days of playing D&D, I always I just like the whole magic user ethos, the sort of that spoke to me at the time, and. The race that I would choose would be dependent on the campaign, what was happening in the campaign, but, it was usually kind of vanilla, kind of human. There's in the current rule set, there is so much going on there. In fact, I find intimidatingly much. I really got into monk builds sort of for a while, which aren't monks anymore. They're now whatever they're called. The kind of unarmed, right? Unarmed channeling inner power. I'm trying to remember what it's called in the current rule set, and I can't remember what it is. Is it still monk? I don't think it is. Is it?
Maybe. There's still
my
monks.
My son is my son's DMing, and so I really have been enjoying the monk build. I couldn't remember it was called the monk. They get some. It's really amazing the amount. I think D&D sort of realized at a certain point, okay, everyone kind of wants to be a superhero. So if you look at the way the classes develop now, it's like, really, like some of the abilities they get are crazily powerful. But then, you know what? Now the DM can have you do more, right? Now the DM can throw bigger challenges at you. I remember grinding like a long time ago, like high school, 80s, grinding D&D campaigns with like, I got magic missile and a torch.
Let's go.
That's what I got. That's what I got. At least my magic missile doesn't miss. Like, that's what I got. This is what I'm bringing to the table. But now it's like you've got to read up on your character, for a while to make sure you understand what it can do. And I'm always refreshing before I get into a campaign. And my son likes the DM, my youngest, so and he's great at it too, which is fabulous. But I'm always getting in there and like, okay, right, what can I do? How can I use this in the game, right? And then there's like crazy things like Dragonborn and stuff like that. Like they're like just clearly like superheroes. Like we're just throwing a superhero in the game. Now this guy can do. Oh, he's gonna breathe fire. You're dead. That sort of thing. But it's up to the DM to balance that. So I think these days I still do enjoy the monk. I kind of like the look. What I bring to the situation is exactly what you see. This is what I've got. You know what I mean? I'm going to Quivering Palm or whatever it is I'm going to do. I'm just going to get by with what you see right here, and I'm going to travel through the world light. And I think it speaks to a kind of approach that I wish I could do more of in my own life, right? I mean, over time in your life, you keep accumulating more and more. I don't mean material things, although certainly some people do accumulate a lot of material things. I just mean responsibilities and memories and regrets and things like that. And it would be nice to, I think sometimes when you're overwhelmed by all of that responsibilities and regrets and things like that, it'd be nice just to imagine I'm just a guy walking through the world with nothing. I just, I need a little bit of food. Maybe I beg for it or scrounge for it. And if a monster comes at me, it's just bare hands. Nothing. And I can do it. I can survive, no problem. So that appeals to me.
Channeled inner power.
What was that other question that was pretty good?
The question was from Asari Greenfire, which was, what's the classic game that will stick in your memory and it's made a big impression on you?
A video game or anything?
Video game.
I guess video game. Yeah, I mean, the earliest one that kind of blew my doors off was Planescape Torment, where it just was, wow, right? Like, okay, this is a story. This is a story with characters that I can get invested in. The corridors were the Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2. Yeah. Again, the sense that, okay, not only, so you took the Planescape Torment and up the ante where you can change the world. You're changing a lot of things based on your path. A lot of things are changing here. And the story was absolutely phenomenal again, right? I mean, I tend to think that the way that stories hit you when you're younger can be, they can hit harder because you can encounter something you've never encountered before, and that element will blow your mind. Whereas, the older you get, it's harder to come along and, it really requires a master hand at storytelling to blow your mind the way that you can blow it when you're, 15 to 25 kind of thing, right? When you're 35 to 55, I think you've got to work harder. And you're also working with more, like characters can be more two-dimensional when you're younger, and as you get older, you realize there aren't too many two-dimensional characters around. Like even the worst person probably somebody likes them. Probably they're nice to somebody. You know what I mean? Like, do they have a pet? Do they like their pet? You know what I mean? Like, does their mom like them? Maybe they look after their mom. Maybe she's in hospice or something. Like maybe she has cancer, and they do everything they can to look after her. But they're terrible people to you. But you know what I mean? Like, and you start realizing, there aren't too many two-dimensional stories in the world. I mean, there are some for sure, but
once again,
there are.
Thoroughly love Arcane.
So then you get to how as you get older, what it takes for a game to blow your mind is hitting you sort of on like a more complex melody with a harmony and better, deeper characters. But when it happens, it can really, really happen. So Outer Wilds, in terms of story, in the sense of exploring, the characters, I mean, there's not a lot of, there is, but it's not the same as it's not a drama about how characters interact. I mean, to a certain extent, there's a little bit of that, right? A video game that has strong characterization that sort of blew my mind because the characters were amazing. That hasn't happened in a while, just because, and in fact, that's a large part of what I'm trying to capture in my game, is the story that I would tell now at this point in my life.
Jumping back just to your last answer, one of the things I'd be fascinated to know is by having children that are also games literate, seeing their experiences with titles, because I feel like I was like one of the last gens to grow up with tech. So like, my first experience of gaming was like a BBC computer at primary school. The first console I had was a classic Game Boy during that era. So like I've had that grow with, I remember when Planescape Torment came out. I remember, like, oh god, Knights of the Old Republic's big launch. Everyone was like, oh, it's not about the original movies. I don't think it's going to be very good. I remember that whole dialogue.
Yeah.
But it also means that as games have grown, so have I. So I don't really have any perspective on what it must be like to step into this medium now. Like, so...
Good point.
That's the one I find fascinating, because, like,
Disco you've had it your whole life, right?
Yeah, Disco Elysium, incredible. But I wonder if that has the potential to impact someone the same way Planescape Torment did to us back in the day. And yes, I did play a lot of these games earlier than I should have. But...
It's funny, I've gone back to play Planescape Torment. Like, I bought the enhanced version and stuff like that. It's cool, but I felt like what I was willing to... The gameplay I was willing to accept in those days is different than it is now. You know what I mean? I get into it and I'm enjoying it, but at the same time, I'm finding, oh, come on, it's dragging. Let's move forward. So, and I wonder if that's just maybe a failing in me. Am I not? Have I trained myself out of the ability to take a long, slow narrative and let it unfold? I don't think so, because I still read, and a lot of the books I read have slow unfolding narratives. But it's funny, maybe my expectations are different when it comes to video games. Oh man, a game that I'll give you a counter example. A game that really rubbed me the wrong way and just won Game of the Year at was it BAFTA? I can't remember what it was It Takes Two.
Yes.
Woo! Boy, did I. So, as a child of divorced parents, I take umbrage at the premise that clearly the best outcome for two people who are getting a divorce is to be rammed back together against their will until they somehow, right? And even if I were willing to grant that premise, the characters are terrible people for the first half of the game. Like, they're mean, they take cheap shots at each other. I'm like, you're asking me to get emotionally invested in these characters that clearly hate each other and are kind of jerks. And there's this big plot point, I want to say about a third of the way through, not a big spoiler, where the two parents decide to completely destroy their child's most precious possession for something that they think might do something that does not. And they come up with this harebrained scheme that, for their own selfish reasons, involves the destruction of their child's most precious item. And they almost delight in it. And it is like, I'm just like, I stopped playing at that moment. I just stopped playing. I'm stopping. I went back to it and tried playing a little more, and I could not connect. But at that moment, I'm like, you've just got me to stop playing the game. So this is let me tell you an interesting true story. So about 10 years ago, when I was going out to the Child's Play charities, and I would bid the big bid and win the big thing. And so Harrison's portal gun that he put up on, I asked the people at Valve to sign it, and they all signed it up. So I went out and I did a road trip in my plane, flew across the country with Harrison, actually, and my sister to go and visit Valve. And I got the tour, I got lunch with Gabe. Like, it was a pretty cool time. And I met a lot of the people, and I did some play testing of Portal 2 and the multiplayer with Jeep, and met some really cool people, and it was a really neat experience. But so Jeep and the Portal people were telling me for Portal 2 that they had to adjust GLaDOS when I don't think I'm spoiling anything for a game this old, so I'm just going to let it rip.
If you haven't played Portal yet.
If you haven't played Portal 2, then I don't know what to tell you. You missed a really great game. Oh, you didn't miss it. But okay. So there's a point where GLaDOS is in a potato, right? Yes. She's been humiliated into a potato, using a potato, and she's and there's a point where the player sort of picks her up and sticks her on one of the tines of the portal gun and proceeds through the level, and GLaDOS now becomes a companion, and there's a little bit of a rapprochement as the two characters sort of bond and realize maybe they're not the enemies they thought they were at the beginning. Maybe they don't have to be friends, but they're not blood enemies anymore. Okay. The problem was, all throughout Portal 1, GLaDOS is happily trying to murder you, and in the beginning of Portal 2, she was taking delight in all kinds of, nefarious plots and trying to kill you, to the point where the Portal team was telling me when we were having lunch, the player testers wouldn't pick up the potato. So they would encounter GLaDOS as a potato on a plate. And she's like, maybe we can both get out of here. And the player's just like, nope, I refuse. I refuse to pick you up. And they had to go back and rewrite GLaDOS to that moment to give her little shards of humanity that the user could just sort of latch on to, right? They were saying players would, and this is like Jeep Barnett, and we were having lunch, and he was just killing himself laughing. He's saying players would pick up the potato, they wouldn't pick up GLaDOS. This is this smart enemy who's been a complete jerk to them throughout a whole game and now another third of the game. And now you have GLaDOS at your mercy and you're like, no, pass, no. So that's what I got to in It Takes Two. I got, all right, like grudgingly, all right, I get it. It's a child's understanding of the universe. Her parents are splitting up, so I'm going to force them back together. I disagree with this, but I am willing to suspend my indignant feelings because it's seen through the eyes of a child. So let's play the game with that sort of, I'll give you that. It's the universe is seen through the eyes of a child. But then the parents hate each other. They're fighting with each other. They're doing mean things to each other. There's the odd moment at the end of each kind of act or scene, I guess, where there's a little bit of they're trying to keep the spark alive where, oh, you know what, they have a realization that maybe they have something in common. But it's like 90%, I hate your guts. And that little spark at the end of like, well, maybe you're not such a bad person, right? And they got to that point where still, like the area under the curve was like negative. I'm sorry, like you're in negative territory. I hate these characters. I hate the way they interact. I hate the way that they talk to each other. They're mean. Like, why do I need to play a video game to see mean people in the world? The world's filled with mean people. I don't need to seek them out in my recreational time, right? And then they
very easy to find.
And then they got to that scene where they did that thing to the thing, and I'm just like, it's GLaDOS potato time. Like, I just have no interest in, like, there was no investment in these characters up until now. Now you're asking me to care about people that would do something this terrible. Why am I giving you this time of my life to do this to me? And then, so look, you can enjoy the game. I'm not telling you not to. Personally, I have not had strong feelings about a game like that in a long time. Like, shaking angry at this game, like, just no. Like, no. And that book, oh, we're going to force you to do this. We're going to force you. Yes, because everybody knows the main tenet of psychotherapy and couples therapy is you must be forced to be there against your will. That's always the hallmark of great progress about to be made, when you're forced to be there.
There's no way this is going to have lasting ramifications at all.
Right. So I have, full disclosure, I have not finished the game. I got about 2/3 of the way through. And I was playing it with my son, right? That's the other thing. I'm playing it with my youngest because there aren't that many games out there that you can play cooperatively with somebody that are not, violent or anything like that. Like Outer Wilds, we weren't playing cooperatively. He was playing and I'm watching. That still felt cooperative because you're unfolding the story together.
Yes.
So we just looked at each other and went, we don't want to play this anymore. Like we just looked at each other and went, no. Like let's Psychonauts. Let's move. Let's Psychonauts too. Let's do that. It's just this weird moment. And then, the gameplay was like technically beautiful game. A lot of the gameplay itself, brilliant. Like some of the rail levels and things like that, really innovative and fun. But, some of the teamwork mechanics in the game, like you have to do that and he has to do that, right? Like she does this and, she's the magnet and he's the hammer or something. Like some of them were really, really creative. And I get that. But holy cow. I can't dissociate story from and characters from the gameplay. I just would not do that. So
no, especially if it's one like that. And
I'm losing my. Can I switch to audio? I'm losing my earpods.
Oh, no worries. If you need to, that is no worry.
There might be some feedback. I just got the AirPods. Well, you know what? Actually, we probably should wrap it up. Any minute, these AirPods are going to die. So maybe one last question, and then I'll bail.
Shackle was just joking, sir. Games to recommend. What about critically acclaimed MMO Final Fantasy XIV with unlimited trial? That's just becoming a glorious joke. And
what is amazing to me is I played Final Fantasy, the first Final Fantasy, and I still think it is ironic that a game called Final Fantasy is like at, what is it, 612 now or something like that? So do you know the story of why it's called Final Fantasy? Am I losing you?
No, go for it.
You must know. It was because it was going to be he was done making fantasy games. And if this one didn't succeed, it wasn't going to make any more. So this was it. This was his last shot at making a fantasy type game. And so there you go. He ended up game kind of big. So.
No, I've always loved that story, and it's lovely to hear people.
So you know the story. Why did you make me tell it?
Because it's lovely to hear people tell it. And Shaka was also pointing out it's rare for a game to get a vitriolic response from me, and iconically, the one that Shackle's referencing is a game called 0 Degrees North, 0 Degrees West. And that is a game that the things you talked about earlier about how the things you enjoy in games are when they treat you with respect, or they treat your time with respect.
Yeah.
This was the exact opposite of it. It's a bunch of Unity shaders laid over unworked environments, but it poses itself as an art house game. So as to say, well, if you don't like it, you don't get it.
The problem's with you. Yeah.
Yeah. It's obviously your fault if you don't
Not
understand
smart
my
enough to
ultimate
appreciate this
genius.
game.
And I'm just like, it's bad. It's so bad. It doesn't want me to be here. It doesn't appreciate my time. I get ragey about games where I am considered to be a burden. I'm all for like linear narrative. I'm all for even on rails games. But anytime it feels like the title is just being like, all right, well, just play with that over there. I'm gonna do story stuff over here. Don't touch anything. In fact, you know what? I'm just gonna handle it all for you. And I'm like, well, why the bloody hell am I here then?
Why am I not on Netflix if we're doing this?
Yes,
yeah, 100%.
If I can leave the game running, walk out the room, and come back, and it's continuing fine without me. But
there is a fine line, because one of the things I really think, hopefully my earpods aren't going to die while I'm having this, and then maybe this will be my final point. What I really think is a positive development in gaming recently is the ability for the game to adjust and adapt to people with different physical abilities, or cognitive abilities. So, I saw like a loop of Forza driving, but with nobody driving the car, but the car was driving. And I think it's really interesting. Like, okay, that may be an extreme example, but what about people with limited mobility, or people with, who need aim assist or something like that? Like, that's fabulous. And it's so far removed from those early sort of, we're going to eat your quarters mercilessly if you make even the smallest neural, glitch in your hand as you're moving this joystick too.
Congratulations,
we want to tell you the story. We want you to have fun. And you know what? Like, I remember Far Cry 6, or the latest one. There's a whole cognitive options menu, and you're like, you can reduce cognitive load, you can outline things, and you know what I mean, for people with visual difficulties, outlining enemies, that's amazing. That's great. Yeah. Why are we not people who are
it's been exceptional.
Amazing.
And I think the thing that comes through is that with that, the developers have created an experience, and they want people to experience it. So it's not removing control because they don't trust us. It is facilitating the difficult parts to bring people in, and you can always feel that. When we did a stream of Control, using the accessibility options, we turned damage off. So it just became a story about exploring the oldest house and unfurling this mystery. And combat was kind of more of a pacing thing with a bit of entertainment, but it wasn't the be-all and end-all. Like, it never stopped being fun beating a bad guy to death with another bad guy. But that wasn't the crux. It wasn't about progressing aggressively. It was like, what is going on with this television zipping around? Why are there clocks pouring out the walls? What's the deal with the rubber duck? And why is everyone afraid of it? Yeah.
It was, and it's funny because you could tell they wanted to call that game SCP, but just didn't. You know what I mean? And as my kids introduced me to SCP, and I'm a big fan of not all of it, but a lot of it. And then I saw the Control game, and I thought, okay, this is some sort of cynical ripoff of SCP. And I got into it, and I'm like, it's kind of a love letter to SCP. It's kind of like we really wish we could call this game SCP, but we can't. So this is what we're going to call it instead, kind of thing. I really. It took all of the wonder and mystery and kind of borderline horror of the best SCP stories and brought them into a cohesive world. Loved Control. Absolutely loved it. And I didn't turn damage off, but I was at a point in the game where they have that big central mail pipe nexus where you first start getting into these all-out battles with 20 people, right? And sometimes protecting others. And I died 3 times in a row, and I went, I bought this game. I'm going to turn the difficulty down, right? I turned it down. I didn't turn it off. I just went down, down, down. Because there's a slider, damage you receive, 20, 30%, 40. And I just played with it till it felt fun. And I'm like, good, it's fun. I never would have done that 10 years ago or 5 years ago. But now I'm like, look, I have limited time to play video games. Limited time. When I sit down and I play 2 or 3 hours of a video game, that's a big investment. That might be the only time I get to play that week.
Yes.
I want to have fun. I want to have fun. So I'm not going to not have fun. I'm going to move this damn slider anywhere it needs to be so that fun comes out. And I 100% agree with you. And it was never not fun. Oh, man, there were some great moments in that game.
Yes.
Talk about storytelling. Great moments in that game. Truly great moments in that game. Yeah, especially if you played the full version, like the extra content version. I picked it up on a Steam sale. That is actually, without spoilers, that game contains what I feel is the best done rail level in the history of rail levels. That is fabulous.
Yeah. I think we all know the section, and it's just pure, unadulterated, fun.
It is just, and the music, and the pacing, and the mechanics, and it was just, I have never had so much fun in a 5-minute rail shooter kind of experience. It was just brilliant. I loved that. It was really good. That was a well done game.
Oh, hells yes.
Now, all right, we should probably wrap it up.
Yes, because if we get started on accessibility and flavor to taste experiences, we will be here until the wee hours.
Anyway, I'm happy to come on some other time if you want.
You know what?
Not a problem.
I would feckin' love that. I will. It'll be a post Christmas because we are both getting a new dog today and moving next week because apparently.
Oh no, it would have to be like couple at least 4 or 6 months in the future. No, it was hard to get this time, and even now I'm kind of supposed to be somewhere else right now. But this was a lot of fun. I stayed on a little longer than I expected to, just because I was having fun, and I haven't had this is a social experience for me. I don't get too many of these in the middle of a pandemic, so this was a lot of fun.
You are always welcome in this corner, but we will absolutely do this again. Thank you so much for insightful and joyful and glorious banter.
Yeah, it has been a lot of fun. Excellent. All right, thank you, community, for sticking with me. That's been awesome.
If you want to follow Stephen on Twitter, as I do, you will find his link there in the chat. And I think that's all that's left to say one more feckin' thank you.
Awesome.
Have a lovely rest of your day.
Appreciate it. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye.